Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. Besides, if that fake emperor could sit on the golden toilet, then why couldn't Shirakawa sit on this? Slaying the false emperor, burning down the galaxy. Just imagining it made him shake his head with a chuckle. He didn't dwell on the changes in the subspace. The subspace, a surging ocean of spiritual energy, wasn't suitable for ordinary life forms. Only soul bodies could exist here. To take his chosen of pleasure into another world, he would need to create bodies from pure subspace energy and house their souls within the chaos. In a sense, as long as a soul had ascended to the subspace and its core wasn't destroyed, their safety was basically guaranteed. But what intrigued him more now was how the skill proficiency panel had changed after truly owning the subspace. He opened a data panel. A detailed set of stats appeared before Shirakawa's eyes. Name, Shirakawa. Gender, male. Age, 17. Physique, 567 agility, 546 strength, 546 spirit, 567 stamina, 546 psychic energy, 22,260. Note, these attributes reflect the state outside the subspace. Click to switch to default subspace state. Current classes, God, Max, Student, Level 5, Exorcist, Level 5, Holy Sword Wielder, Level 9, Archwizard, Level 7, Reputation points. 2. The numbers left Shirakawa briefly stunned. These were essentially 10 times stronger than his original physical stats. This was the amplification effect from using Sao and the virtual world seed to open a subspace. His current state was just a partial projection of subspace power, so what showed here weren't even his full stats. What if he were actually inside the subspace? He switched the panel to show his normal stats as the creator of the subspace. Combat power, weak country level. Now that makes sense. Rather than precise numbers, measuring combat power like this was more intuitive than seeing wildly fluctuating figures. To unleash his full strength, he would have to draw enemies into the subspace, or cause a subspace storm to overlap with the real world. Not too difficult. After reviewing the panel, Shirakawa finally let out a long breath. His immediate goal had been achieved. The subspace hadn't collapsed, which meant he had entered an eternal state of existence. As for what that truly meant, he'd only find out through actual combat. He detected a drifting soul in the subspace. He didn't need to guess. It was Kayaba Akihiko, whose consciousness had been merged into the Sao world. Now that the world had changed, he'd been rejected by it. Kayaba still looked like a lab researcher in a white coat, but the surging spiritual tides had fried his hair completely. He stared blankly at the world around him. Newly risen grasslands and forests, towering palaces in the distance, and spiritual tides powerful enough to scatter his soul. As for Shirakawa, all Kayaba could feel was confusion. So this is divine power? Then the golden-eyed figure appeared before him. Those pure golden eyes carried the aura of chaos and oblivion. What should he even call this being? With respect in his eyes and a humble tone, he said, Lord God. Shirakawa looked at Kayaba calmly. If someone wasn't one of his chosen of pleasure, staying in the subspace would only result in brainwashing from the endless data flow, eventually turning them into a fanatic. That sort of thing was best avoided. Even fanatics of the god of pleasure weren't as valuable as beautiful girls who could offer their all at any time. Your soul isn't suited to remain in the subspace. It's time to fulfill my promise. I'll reincarnate you into the other world you wanted. Chapter 90, Journey to Konosuba. The goddess Eris. The god profession couldn't be leveled up. The only way to gain strength was to expand the scope of the subspace. Sao's virtual world seed. On a cosmic scale, it wasn't even that significant. Within a galaxy, it was merely a drop in the ocean. Gaining country-level combat power was already good. Nothing too unexpected. Keeping Kayaba's soul in subspace wouldn't do. The world of Konosuba had Eris. Although she couldn't manage other worlds, she could handle reincarnation just fine. Using a cross-world teleportation anchor, Shirakawa decisively set the destination to Konosuba. With more jumps, he was getting used to the feeling. He opened a Dimension chat group. Normal high school student, Aqua, where are you? Aqua, I'm lying around at Darkness's house. Her place is huge. Megaman's here too, along with one of her Crimson Daemon friends. Aqua, why? Blue Ribbon, ordinary high school student, any plans for where to house your familia? Normal high school student, I'm in Axel. I've got something to discuss with you, Aqua. Aqua had fully settled into a lazy lifestyle after moving into Darkness's mansion. She bought sparkling wine with her own money and wasted time. Occasionally heading out with Megaman to unleash some explosion magic. Defeating the Demon King? Not exactly urgent. She could put it off until they had more money. Swirling her glass of bubbly, she sobered up and slowly got up from the plush sofa. Megaman, also in slacker mode, looked at her in surprise. Aqua? What's up? Shirakawa was here. Probably has something to ask me. After all, as a great goddess, if a party member needs help, I obviously have to lend a hand. Aqua stretched lazily. She wore a pale blue feathered robe that perfectly outlined her curves. But aside from Shirakawa needing something, she also had news for him. As the record-holding hero who took out the Demon King's headless general faster than anyone else, Shirakawa had apparently caught the interest of royalty. Meeting royalty? Aqua hadn't been in Konosuba very long, so it didn't feel like a big deal. But based on Darkness's attitude, it was probably a very serious matter. She arrived at the Adventurers Guild and quickly spotted Shirakawa in his adventurer gear. Waving, she said, Shirakawa. What did you want to ask? Looking at the blue-haired goddess who'd dragged herself to the guild, Shirakawa asked directly, can you reincarnate a soul into another world? Huh? Are you trying to reincarnate into Konosuba's world? That's not easy. You have to die unexpectedly. Besides, don't you already have the ability to travel back and forth between our worlds? Why the sudden question? Aqua's eyes were filled with confusion. Normally, if someone dies an unexpected death, reincarnating into another world was simple. But now, this sparkling wine really was good. It's an agreement I made with someone a while back. He has something I want. In return, I offered him a chance to reincarnate. He didn't go into detail about the Sao game world. Shirakawa gave a brief explanation, then shifted his gaze to Aqua. Using her as a channel to contact the goddess of this world. Chris was the real goal. Or rather, to find the thief Chris and pressured her into admitting her true identity. You. After hearing all this, Aqua's eyes were filled with deep suspicion. No matter how she tried to imagine it, Shirakawa just didn't come off as a good person to her. Not even close. She tugged at the corner of her mouth and said in an unusually gentle voice, Hey, Shirakawa-kun, are you sure it's not just that he has something you want? And since he wouldn't give it, you beat him up and then offered to reincarnate him into another world? Shirakawa's fists clenched instinctively. His eyelids twitched wildly as he shot back, You're a goddess. Can you do this or not? If not, I'll just ask the Dimension chat group. I can. Of course I can. If it's reincarnating into this world, then all you need to do is find my junior goddess Eris. Just so happens the reincarnation rate here is really low. Feeling her divine authority challenged, Aqua agreed without hesitation. She tried to use her divine authority to contact Eris, but even after a while, she got no response. Maybe Eris is just really busy or something. With a slightly awkward expression, Aqua could only come up with a weak excuse. At that moment, a silver-haired girl wearing a revealing outfit walked into the Adventurers Guild. It was Chris. The tomboyish girl who'd been with Darkness earlier. When she spotted Shirakawa and Aqua, she approached and greeted them. Shirakawa, Lady Aqua. Oh, it's Chris. Aqua greeted her half-heartedly. She knew this silver-haired girl was a friend of Darkness. They'd met when forming their adventurer party. Are you two going on a quest or something? Chris glanced over at Shirakawa before focusing her gaze on Aqua. She asked casually, Where's Darkness? Nope. Shirakawa has something he wants to ask. Or is for help with. Do you know where her temple is? No matter what, Aqua absolutely refused to go visit her junior goddess's temple. But now that a suitable errand girl had shown up, Chris should be willing to help. If it's okay with you, could you take Shirakawa there? I'll treat you to drinks afterward. Chris didn't know much about Shirakawa. Just that he was supposedly a hero summoned by her senior Aqua, famous for defeating a Demon King general. Known as the strongest adventurer in Axel. She blinked her blue eyes and asked curiously, Shirakawa, you want to go to Eris's temple? I can take you. Sure. On the way to the temple, Chris curiously studied the young man walking beside her, then asked, With your strength, is there really anything you need help with? There is. Shirakawa wore a gentle smile, his clean-cut face glowing with sunlight. His tone carried a hint of helplessness. I want to have someone's soul reincarnated into another world. Can you help me with that, Lady Eris? Chapter 91, Persecuting Eris. Hiratsuka Shizuka decides to move. Chris froze upon hearing that, her expression visibly stiffening. She scratched at the scar on her cheek. One she hadn't bothered to hide. Just as she was about to lie, she turned her head and met the boy's pure golden eyes glowing with divine radiance. A god could see through a person's essence. Aqua just wasn't capable of it. But this teammate of hers. He was a god too? Please. Don't tell Lady Aqua about this. She didn't deny it. Eris shook her head lightly, her blue eyes flickering with curiosity. She didn't doubt Shirakawa's character. After all, her senior Aqua was a great judge of people. Unlike the tomboy persona she usually wore, her voice was gentle. In exchange, as long as it's not something that would disrupt the world order, I'll help you. I just need you to help reincarnate someone's soul into your world. Eris. Hearing the request, her expression stiffened even more. To be exact, this wasn't even a request in the traditional sense. Even with the Demon King's army around, most souls didn't want to reincarnate into the Konosuba world. But still, Shirakawa wanted to send a human soul here? Eris couldn't find a reason to refuse. She nodded lightly in agreement. So, where is this soul? I've stored it in another dimension. I need you to help transport it and handle the reincarnation. Within the chaotic subspace, unless a stable conduit was created to connect it to another world, it was difficult for anything to descend into a new realm. With that in mind, Shirakawa's consciousness entered the subspace. Using his body as an anchor, he transformed spiritual energy into a thread that pierced through the void, constructing a stable passageway to Konosuba's world with multiple safety constraints. If he didn't control it, the overflowing subspace energy would seriously damage that world. As the goddess of fortune who presided over the entire world, Eris turned to the boy once she sensed the conduit forming. You're linking your space to my world? Yep. Without a stable link, I wouldn't be able to reach your subspace. Ignoring whether she minded or not, Shirakawa took her soft, slender hand in his own. Through that contact, the conduit instantly connected to the subspace. With a thought, he and Eris were transported there instantly. With a touch of mischief, Shirakawa sat on his golden throne. Next to him, Eris appeared stunned, nearly falling into his arms. In this world, she appeared not as the thief Chris, but in her true divine form. She wore a dark blue floral dress. Her chest had clearly been padded. She glanced around the palace. It was completely different from her own world. The place overflowed with pure subspace energy. This is your space? More or less. Shirakawa didn't explain much. What surprised him was that Eris's true form could exist here. Something that contradicted his expectations about the subspace. She wasn't overwhelmed by negative emotions. It was like an emerald illusion, just filled with pure energy. The chosen of pleasure could appear here without issue. That seemed to check out. He swept his awareness through the chaotic space and quickly located Kayaba Akihiko in the starting town. Without giving advance notice, he teleported the soul to the palace. Looking at Kayaba before him, Shirakawa said casually, "This is the soul I need you to help reincarnate into another world." Eris gave the middle-aged man a cursory glance. Nothing remarkable about his appearance. Using her divine authority, she collected the soul. Finally, she turned to Shirakawa. "Anything else?" "No." Shirakawa gently shook his head, his eyes lingering on Eris. Even ignoring the scar on her cheek, her looks were stunning. She wore a pale blue dress. Blue heels. Smooth white stockings hugged her shapely legs. Teasing her had become a daily routine. With a playful smile, he joked, "It's just Aqua keeps saying your chest is padded." But before he could even finish the sentence, Eris's figure vanished from the subspace, returning to the celestial realm to handle the reincarnation queue. She did her best to calm herself down. But the blush on the girl's cheeks couldn't be hidden. She had no choice but to shift her attention and release Kayaba Akihiko's soul, reverting to her proper goddess appearance. "Welcome to the afterlife. I am Eris, the goddess who shall guide you to a new path. Your life in that world has came to an end." Why Ishikawa didn't stay in the Konosuba world? He still hadn't fully figured out how to deal with darkness, so he chose to return to the real world for now. As for forming a familia in Danmuki, that could be delayed. With Sakurajima under the care of Lily and Hestia, there wasn't much to worry about. They could help her properly adapt to the other world. In the world of High School of the Dead, Tsukobujujima and Shizuka Marikawa were already designated as chosen of pleasure. Even if he brought them back to the real world, it wouldn't cause much issue. He could even set up a spatial tether to let them travel freely between the subspace and the apocalypse world. He hadn't visited Goblin Slayer's world lately, though. So he had no idea how the Sword Maiden was doing. There really are a lot of things I need to take care of. Helping the Sword Maiden become a chosen of pleasure, whether it was to strengthen her or to bring her somewhere safer, wasn't an issue either. Upon returning to the real world, in the bedroom of his luxury apartment, Shirakawa saw that it had been thoroughly cleaned by Izumi Mayo. Before heading to the SAO world, he'd already completely shattered her worldview. Picking up the phone lying on the bed, he glanced out the window. It was nearly dusk. But as he checked his line messages, his expression froze. Over 10 unread messages and multiple missed calls. All mainly from Hiratsuka Shizuka, with a few from Miro Yumiko. Miro Yumiko, Shiraishi-kun, I'm going to karaoke with Ebina and Yua. Just us girls, okay? Photo.jpg Hiratsuka Shizuka, I've decided to move in. Where are you? I've already packed everything. Where are you? I'm at apartment 14 with Izumi. Reply when you see this. Fist emoji. Mira's message could be ignored. But Hiratsuka Shizuka suddenly deciding to move in made the corners of his mouth twitch. Most importantly, his homeroom teacher was now teaming up with the housewife he was about to conquer. Chapter 92, helping Hiratsuka Shizuka move, and Yukino Shitaharuno senses something unusual. In front of Izumi Mayo, Shirakawa had openly used his power to go to the SAO world and complete a chat group mission. In a way, he had chosen to reveal everything to her. And similarly, he had made no attempt to hide his strength from Hiratsuka Shizuka. So things needed to be handled separately. He couldn't just say, "You'll all become my wings," or something overly dramatic. He couldn't even imagine saying it. Not dwelling too much, he removed the adventurer outfit he'd gotten from Konosuba, took a shower, and changed into fresh clothes. Then he headed to room 14, where Izumi Mayo and Seigyori lived. Knock knock. Izumi Mayo didn't keep him waiting long. Wearing casual loungewear and with her hair braided over her shoulder, the youthful housewife opened the door. The moment she saw Shirakawa, her eyes lit up with joy. She spoke proactively, "Shirakawa-kun, this afternoon. Your homeroom teacher showed up, said she was moving in. Brought a lot of luggage. With nowhere else to go, I let her stay in the guest apartment." "I know." He nodded lightly. "She messaged me online. I just hadn't replied yet." Changing into indoor slippers, he headed into the living room, leaving Mayo standing in the hallway. Her gaze followed his back, filled with disbelief. She had seen it with her own eyes. He had vanished into another world. Even after a full day of trying to process it, she was still overwhelmed. Gathering her emotions, she followed after him. On the sofa, Hiratsuka Shizuka was helping Seigyori with homework. When she saw Shirakawa, who had completely ghosted her, the look on her face was complicated. Even though Mayo had explained he was busy with important things, surely that didn't mean he could just ignore all her messages? "You finally decided to come back?" "I had a lot of complicated things to handle," he replied. He didn't give much detail, though he was a bit surprised that she had so quickly decided to move in. Not overthinking it, he pulled out a bunch of keys from his pocket. He spoke lightly, "Sensei, you can pick whichever place you want. Rooms 11 through 14, all the apartment keys are here. Rent is 80,000 yen per month." He knew full well that Hiratsuka Shizuka came from a wealthy background. A regular high school teacher couldn't afford a sports car. If he waived rent, she'd probably find it suspicious. After all, to him, money was just numbers at this point. He could bring gold from other worlds and exchange it freely. But no need to say that. Checking the time on her phone, Hiratsuka closed Seigyori's textbook and stood up. "That's it for tutoring today. Seigyori, I need to go get moving." "Thank you, sensei." Seigyori sighed with relief, but her eyes kept flickering toward Shirakawa. Then she lowered her head and stared at the still pristine textbook, lost in thought. At the entrance, Shizuka took off her slippers. The black stockings on her feet were high quality, and she slipped into some flat shoes. She wasn't particularly concerned about the teacher-student relationship right now. They weren't at school. Her tone was a bit teasing, "You'd better pick me a good unit. I've been waiting a while now." "No problem." Feeling her hand rest on his shoulder, Shirakawa didn't think much of it. Since she was single and living alone, he led her to a two-bedroom unit. One room had already been converted into a study, the other for sleeping. Perfect for her. He explained the basics, turned on the water and electricity, and helped a bit with moving. The building had an elevator, so it wasn't hard. But during the move, a familiar figure caught his attention. Short, practical haircut. A sunny, big sister vibe. She bore a subtle resemblance to Yukino Shita Yukino. But her figure was far beyond her younger sister's. There was no way Shirakawa wouldn't recognize her. This was Yukino Shita Haruno, the elder daughter of the Yukino Shita family. a flawless demon-type older sister. Noticing his gaze, Haruno looked curiously at him before asking Shizuka, "Shizuka, is this your student?" "Yeah. My student. And now my landlord." While unpacking her luggage, Shizuka answered casually, clearly annoyed by the hassle of moving. Now understanding his identity, Haruno gave him a serious once-over. If he was Shizuka's student, that meant he went to Sobya High. As for being her landlord, that piqued her curiosity. She'd visited Shizuka's old luxury apartment before, and clearly, the one she was moving into now was a downgrade. Why the sudden move? She was genuinely curious. Wearing a radiant smile like a next-door big sister, Haruno stepped forward and introduced herself. "Nice to meet you. I'm Yukino Shita Haruno. Technically speaking, I'm your senpai. I've heard about you from the student council. You're Haruno senpai, right? Just call me Shirakawa." No matter how scheming someone was, it meant nothing in front of absolute power. And at her core, Haruno was still just a little sister fanatic. Shirakawa greeted casually. Haruno nodded slightly in return. Her gaze swept across the apartment and she gave a rather objective comment, "Is this your place? It's pretty close to Sobya High. Seems really convenient for both work and school. No wonder Shizuka decided to move here." She didn't mind Shirakawa's relaxed tone. Haruno walked onto the balcony connected to the living room. She could sense something unusual about Hiratsuka Shizuka and a hint of doubt flickered in her eyes. Or is there some other reason? Maybe I'm just overthinking it. For some reason, she couldn't shake the feeling that things weren't as simple as they appeared. Almost as if she'd discovered a new amusement, she cheerfully suggested, "Once we finish moving, let's go out for dinner together. Consider it a housewarming celebration. You don't mind, do you, Shirakawa-kun?" Chapter 93, A Surprise Encounter with Kawasaki Saki, and Yukino Wants Answers. Shirakawa didn't object to Haruno's dinner invitation. Looking at Azumi Mayo, who was currently at home, it was clear she hadn't prepared anything for dinner. Cooking something last minute would be a hassle. Joining Hiratsuka and Haruno for a meal didn't sound like a bad idea. Even if they weren't JK-level high school girls anymore. They were still beautiful women, after all. "Since you don't mind, there's a Western restaurant nearby that's pretty good," Haruno said, blinking as she pulled up a map on her phone. Her gaze settled on a highly rated restaurant close by. If Shirakawa were just an ordinary high school student, a cheaper fast food spot would be more appropriate. But judging by the situation, he was the owner of this apartment building. Money clearly wasn't a concern. So they could afford a bit more luxury. Even if she, the senpai, offered to treat her kuhai, it wouldn't be strange. Sure. Hiratsuka glanced at the mess inside the apartment. Cleaning it all up would definitely take a while. At least the entire evening. She looked at Haruno with a slightly warning gaze and said seriously, "Since it's a housewarming dinner, this one's on me." "Oh." Haruno instantly picked up on the subtext, basically, don't stir the pot at dinner tonight, right? As they'd say in other Asian households. The guest follows the host's rules. Still, it was precisely Hiratsuka's attitude that made Haruno even more curious about Shirakawa. It was rare to see Hiratsuka Shizuka pay this much attention to a student. She smiled brightly and replied, "Since Shizuka's treating, I'll cover the cost at the izakaya later. If you're a second year, Shiraishi-kun, then technically you're still underage. It's a shame you won't be able to drink." With Haruno in the group, there was no way the mood could go cold. Riding in a Rolls-Royce owned by the Yukino Shita family, they headed to the restaurant. Hiratsuka and Haruno sat in the back. While Ishikawa took the passenger seat. Most of the conversation revolved around him. Haruno asked questions, and Hiratsuka, as his homeroom teacher, answered. When Haruno heard that Shirakawa had consistently ranked first in his year, surpassing even Yukino in the humanities, her eyes showed clear surprise. She remembered that Yukino rarely talked about her grades. The only time she ever brought it up was when Haruno asked and found out she'd placed second. But now, Shirakawa was outperforming even Yukino? "Shirakawa-kun, have you thought about where you want to go for university? Tokyo U? Waseda? Or maybe just a local national university?" Haruno asked with sincere curiosity. Grades alone didn't say much. No matter how good he was, it was hard to escape one's social class. But after interacting with him even briefly, Shirakawa, he didn't feel like a typical high schooler. She wasn't sure if he was just putting on a mature front for his teacher and senpai. That thought sparked a mischievous idea. As they drove toward the Western restaurant, she pulled out her phone and messaged her younger sister Yukino online. "Haruno, I'm having dinner at this restaurant. Shizuka's here too. Location shared, Yukino, you should come too. It's not a super formal dinner, but you should dress nicely if possible." Haruno sent the message. She didn't care whether Yukino declined. Her eyes scanned Shirakawa's handsome side profile, leaving everything else aside. He was definitely the handsome type. The Rolls-Royce soon arrived at the hotel. Following Haruno's lead, they made their way to the rooftop Western restaurant. The ambience was excellent. In addition to dinner service, there was also a bar where guests could order drinks. So they didn't even need to go to an izakaya afterward. While Haruno was booking a table at the bar, Wide Ishikawa noticed a familiar figure. Wearing a sleek black women's suit over a white shirt, silver hair tied into a high ponytail, the girl's expression was cool and distant. Compared to Yukino's innate aloofness, this one was even more stoic. She was wiping glasses with a towel, about to serve a customer when she saw someone she knew. It was her classmate, Shirakawa. Kawasaki-saki's eyes flickered with discomfort. You. What are you doing here? Coincidence, I guess? Wide Ishikawa shrugged, glancing at Hiratsuka and Haruno in the distance. He smiled and leaned in with a subtle warning, if you don't want Hiratsuka-sensei to find out you're working here, best to go help in the kitchen or maybe take the day off. Meanwhile, back at the apartment, Yukino had returned from Sobya High. Thanks to her spiritual side ability, she hadn't attended service club lately. Even with all the lights in the apartment turned on, those dark spirits lurking in the corners constantly agitated her nerves. Her mind felt like a taut string, ready to snap at the slightest touch. Reading Haruno's message, Yukino fell into brief contemplation. There were usually more spirits out on the streets at night. Going out was definitely a challenge. But Haruno's non-negotiable tone made her sigh. Since a driver was already downstairs, she decided to go. If it's just a casual dinner with Hiratsuka-sensei, why do I need to dress formally? She didn't understand her sister's intentions. But she still followed instructions, picking out a long black evening dress. Though it didn't highlight her figure, with her elegant and cool beauty, it was more than enough. Maybe she could talk to her sister about the evil spirits she'd been encountering. It was hard to even describe the experience, but perhaps she could ask Haruno if she should get Shirakawa's help. No need to explain the details. Looking into the mirror, Yukino slipped on a pair of low-heeled matching shoes, then pulled out her phone and called Haruno's driver. It's time to go. Chapter 94, As Death's Challenge, Yukino is confused. Although Haruno didn't say anything outright, just seeing the 4 sets of tableware on the dining table, Shirakawa could already guess who the 4th was. Yukino. The message couldn't be more obvious. Using her high academic performance as a foil to frustrate her younger sister and set up a role model in the process. He could guess that with his eyes closed. It was a family matter for the Yukino-shita household. Shirakawa had no intention of commenting. If there was anything unexpected, it was probably that Yukino, despite having awakened spiritual awareness, still hadn't given a final answer. Still, he wasn't particularly worried. He'd already told Yukino how to avoid evil spirits and how to stay safe. Whatever happened now, it was up to her. Gaining another chosen of pleasure would just mean adding one more brick to the Crystal Palace and strengthening it slightly. The dinner conversation didn't drift to him. It was mostly Haruno casually chatting with Hiratsuka. Taking advantage of the downtime, Shirakawa stepped onto the nearby terrace and looked out at Chiba as it was slowly enveloped by night. Finally getting a bit of peace and quiet, he opened the dimensional chat group to check in. Now that Shinobu had returned to her routine, the group atmosphere had picked up again. Healing Goddess, Mistress of the Butterfly State, can you tell us more about how the mission went? Healing Goddess, I heard the group usually streams these rescue missions. Why wasn't there a stream this time? Mistress of the Butterfly State, the mission was actually pretty simple. It was just helping Asuna leave the Sao world. We were supposed to be clearing Inkgrad. Mistress of the Butterfly State, I still don't know how Shirakawa did it. He suddenly got world liberation permissions, and the mission wrapped up just like that. Huge thanks to him. Asuna, that's right. If it hadn't been for Shirakawa, I can't imagine how much longer I would have been trapped inside Sao. Future Holy Sword Wielder, Butterfly Master, what are you going to spend your points on this time? Mistress of the Butterfly State, I'll probably buy an interworld teleport anchor. I'm really interested in Shirakawa's modern society. I'd love to visit. Ice Queen, Mistress of the Butterfly State, did you say a regular high schooler liberated an entire world? Asuna, that's right. Shirakawa helped all the players escape. Ice Queen, normal high school student, I've saved up 50 points. If you're free, I'd like to challenge you to a fight. Even without saying a word in the group, he was the center of attention. Shirakawa felt weird about it. Especially since the one issuing the challenge was none other than battle maniac and sadist as Death. A challenge, from her? As the strongest ego user from the Akamga Kill world, her power was unquestionable. In the group, excluding gods, she was probably the strongest. For her to issue a sparring invitation directly in the group, and not even come barging into his world, that was already being polite by her standards. Should I accept the challenge? The thought flickered through Shirakawa's mind. As Death's Eyes typed Egu, Demon's Extract, had top-tier combat power, including her hidden abilities like Mahapadma, Ice Cavalry, and Ice Commander-in-Chief. The former allowed her to freeze time briefly, though it could only be used once per day. The latter summoned an army of ice soldiers far superior to ordinary troops. But its real purpose was to store up Egu energy over days, and then unleash it all in one go. Combined with Asdeath herself, she could trigger Ice Age domination, covering an entire empire. According to his stat panel, she probably ranked at Nation Destroyer level. Though that assumed home ground advantage and full energy build-up. Could he win? He would. Shirakawa was just as curious about his current subspace strength potential. He was going to the Akonga Kill world anyway. This challenge was perfect timing. Besides, in the group, fighting maniacs like her always came with battle CGs upon defeat. He hadn't decided the conditions yet, but without making her wait too long, he replied decisively, "Normal high school student, no problem. I accept your challenge. Let's decide the time later. I've got something else to take care of right now." Mistress of the Butterfly State, come to think of it, I don't think I've ever seen Shirakawa go all out. Blue Ribbon, now I'm curious too. I can't give too many spoilers, but this is definitely going to be an epic fight. Aqua, Blue Ribbon, stop being so cryptic already. Railgun, has Shirakawa's strength increased again recently? Asuna, can the match be live streamed? Healing Goddess, I want to watch the live stream too. Ice Queen, a challenge, huh? Ice Queen, I'm looking forward to it. I hope it's worthy of being called a challenge. Watching the group chat, Asdeath's eyes gleamed with anticipation. She had taken a deep interest in Shirakawa after seeing his activities in previous live streams. From what little others had said, it was clear he had gone from average strength to being someone who could easily destroy a city. As an opponent, Shirakawa was worthy. Anticipating their upcoming battle, Asdeath licked her lips slightly, her excitement sincere. Shirakawa stopped checking the chat group. Mainly because Haruno had stood up and was calling him over. The final guest for the informal dinner party had arrived. Yukino, dressed in a black evening gown, had just finished exchanging greetings with Hiratsuka and was about to take a seat. When she saw a very familiar figure approaching, the girl's calm expression rippled. She hadn't expected to see Shirakawa here at all. Haruno, of course, was loving the drama. With a bright smile, she introduced them. Yukino-chan, you know him, right? He's your second-year classmate from Sobya High. Shirakawa-kun. Chapter 95, The Defeated Haruno, and the late-night visit of Mrs. Izumi. Yukino had thought it was just a coincidence. But after seeing the dinner table set up, she realized there were more people coming. Even so, she never expected him. Her expression stiffened. It wasn't about grades. What bothered her was the spiritual awareness she'd recently gained. The ability to see evil spirits had shaken her. She wasn't the type to ask for help from others. And she could feel that the cost involved in dealing with this wasn't something she could afford. Why does it seem like Yukino-chan and Shirakawa-kun? Catching the subtle shift in her sister's expression, Haruno asked teasingly, you two seem to know each other? Yeah. There weren't enough club rooms at school, so Yukino Shita-san's club and the one I used to be in ended up sharing a room. Shirakawa replied casually. It was true. There was nothing deeper between them. At most, she had just been present when Miro Yumiko's power awakened. He returned to his seat, ready to just get dinner over with. The food was expensive, sure, but the key part was that he wasn't paying. That made it taste even better. Throughout the meal, Haruno kept glancing at him, clearly trying to steer the conversation his way. But he didn't even bother to respond. Eating meant eating. Haruno narrowed her eyes. She caught Yukino's subtle evasiveness in her words. Her curiosity toward Shirakawa only grew. With Hiratsuka's sudden decision to move, and Yukino's clearly guarded behavior, everything pointed back to Shirakawa. As the dinner party wound down, Haruno paid the bill herself. Then, in a light tone that clearly carried other implications, she said, it's a shame you and Yukino-chan still have school tomorrow, Shirakawa-kun. We'll end it here for tonight. But oh. One more thing. I hope you can look after Yukino a little at school. Of course. Shirakawa replied decisively. Whether or not he was actually planning to attend school was beside the point. Saying something nice didn't cost a thing. Helping deal with the evil spirits. It all depended on what choice Yukino would make. Haruno hadn't expected Shirakawa to be so cooperative. Now she even had a valid excuse to go find him again. After waving goodbye, she turned to see Shizuka's rather odd expression. "What's wrong, Shizuka?" "Ah. I forgot to mention, Shirakawa's academic performance is excellent. He's already finished studying all of the high school curriculum. Just recently. He asked me for a long-term leave of absence." Haruno's expression twitched at that revelation, and she couldn't help but glance at Yukino, who was struggling to hold back a laugh. Suddenly, she didn't know what to say anymore. Eventually, she looked back at Shizuka with a smile and suggested, "Let's go have a drink at the bar. I'll take you home afterward." Looking at the line message from Shizuka, Shirakawa gave it a brief glance. The content could be summarized in one phrase: "Nicely done." Still, he didn't really dwell on it. As far as interactions with Haruno went, what he needed to focus on now was Esdeath's challenge in the dimensional group chat. He needed to enter subspace for the battle. That sort of encounter counted as a peak condition battle, dependent on time and place. It wasn't representative of his usual power level. Considering Esdeath's near nation-destroying strength, "I really need to visit the Akamgakil world." Shirakawa quickly made up his mind and began constructing a link to the chaotic realm, allowing subspace storms to descend upon Akamgakil. It was a good way to get a better grasp of things. As a god-class profession, leveling up his strength wasn't just about increasing his chosen followers or cult followers. The main factor was still the expansion of his subspace. As for how to actually expand it, he hadn't figured it out yet. After leaving the high-end hotel, Shirakawa was just about to hail a cab when he ran into a familiar figure. Kawasaki Saki. She was still in her bar waitress uniform. Holding her school bag in one hand and looking down at an old flip phone, she turned her head warily when the hotel's automatic doors opened, only to see that it was Shirakawa. As always, Kawasaki Saki's face remained cold and emotionless. Still, she gave a brief thanks, her tone distant. "Thanks for what happened earlier. Even if you're working part-time, you don't need to hide from your teachers, right?" Her sudden gratitude was probably due to what had happened earlier. Shirakawa didn't think much of it. As for why she was working, he already knew the story. She wanted to go to college but lacked the money, so she was doing night shifts to ease her family's burden. The plot had always developed that way. He'd just gotten lucky to run into her during dinner. Other teachers might not care, but Hiratsuka-sensei definitely would ask a lot of questions. Kawasaki didn't explain in too much detail. After all, she couldn't exactly say she was emotionally absent most of the time. Getting caught working could lead to bigger problems. During their short conversation, she glanced at her phone. "I told my manager I was taking a break. Now I'm going back. Bye. See you." Shirakawa had the most goodwill toward Kawasaki Saki. She had ambition, took action, and most importantly, she was mature and understanding. He watched her walk off, seemingly toward the train station. It wasn't like he had any pervy ideas about following her. He casually flagged down a cab and went back to his rented apartment. As for how to expand the subspace, he could run a simple test in the Apocalypse world. After greeting the 4 urban legends who protected the apartment complex, he arrived home. Without even having time to wash up, Shirakawa prepared to head to the Apocalypse world to put his ideas to the test. But just as he was about to depart, the brief sound of the doorbell echoed through the living room and into his bedroom. Feeling puzzled, he got up and opened the door, only to be met with a familiar sight. It was Izumi Mayo, wearing her loungewear. It was obvious she had just taken a bath. Her damp hair still dripped with water, and her fair face had a faint pink flush. Realizing how inappropriate a nighttime visit was, the proud Izumi Mayo gave a gentle smile and explained, I've been working on illustrations for an isekai light novel recently. There are some things I don't quite understand, so I came to ask for your help." Chapter 96, The Initiative of Mrs. Izumi. Free to use any style of cooking. So it's Mrs. Izumi. His preparations to head to the Apocalypse world were interrupted. Shirakawa looked over the young housewife standing at the doorway. Her figure, concealed under loose loungewear, was still clearly well proportioned. She had just showered, and the ends of her hair were still damp. Her fair cheeks were lightly flushed. Even with a prepared excuse, this situation felt a bit off. "Madam, please do not disturb my practice." Even as he thought that, Shirakawa still stepped aside, letting her into the entrance hall. As for the reason she came looking for him, it wasn't hard to guess. When he'd gone to the Sao world, he hadn't tried to hide any trace of his dimensional crossing. What was surprising, though, was that Izumi Mayo hadn't told anyone else about it. Not even Hiratsuka Shizuka. It's just, illustrations for isekai light novels tend to have pretty specific stylistic demands, so I thought I'd ask Shirakawa-kun. You're familiar with these things, right? Izumi Mayo had clearly prepared her reason for visiting in advance. And in fact, it wasn't a lie. the best-selling author from the Full Drive imprint. Yamada Elf had recently become more active in the illustration circle. Her new Isekai light novel was looking for a test illustrator, and she had approached Mio. I'm fairly familiar. Of course I can help. It was late enough to count as night time. Izumi Mio hadn't expected herself to visit a high school student at such an hour. But the shock she'd experienced that morning, she just couldn't get it out of her head. Changing into indoor slippers, she followed Shirakawa into the living room. Sitting on the sofa, she looked a little uneasy as she accepted a glass of chilled barley tea. Shirakawa-kun. Is it really true that you can go to other worlds? Don't worry. I haven't told anyone about it. Not even Sagiri. Of course it's true. So, Mrs. Izumi, how exactly do you want to learn about other worlds? To be precise, what kind of Isekai setting are you aiming for? Shirakawa spoke casually. After all, not all Isekai were the same. Some had the dark fantasy tone of Goblin Slayer, others the insane comedy of Konosuba. However, judging by Izumi Mio's usual illustration style, it was probably leaning toward the light-hearted, slightly fan-service-y side. Shirakawa-kun, are you saying there are actually many different other worlds? Catching the implication in his words, Mio's curiosity was fully piqued. Once she got going, she couldn't help but ask more questions. Recalling what Yamada Elf had requested for the project, she quickly added, the light novel is told from a female perspective, set in an Isekai. The working title is The Dark Elf of Explosive Flames. The character design is a bit hot-blooded, I guess. I really can't figure out what sort of illustration style would suit it. The name The Dark Elf of Explosive Flames caught Shirakawa's attention. That title sounded way too familiar. Wasn't that a novel from the same anime as Izumi Sagiri, written by Yamada Elf? After all the dimensional shifts he had made to alter timelines, Shirakawa hadn't expected to encounter Yamada Elf's work through Mio of all people. Through Izumi Sagiri. She had become her hero manga sensei's first generation, Izumi Mio. Especially after hearing the light novel illustration request for Explosive Flames. Dark Elf. With a fiery and Chunabiu personality, for some reason, a familiar face popped into Shirakawa's mind. Megaman. Except for the slightly different identity, Shirakawa felt this novel was essentially an OVA tailor-made for Megaman. A gift of explosions to the wonderful world. I have a rough idea. But it's really hard to describe it to you properly. This kind of thing is best experienced in person, Mrs. Izumi. You'd have to go to the other world yourself. After hearing that, Izumi Mio's beautiful eyes froze. To actually go to another world for material gathering. For someone living an ordinary city life, this held fatal allure. Even more so because she wanted to understand Shirakawa better. Really? Shirakawa-kun. Of course. Though, going to another world comes at a cost. Let me explain my current identity first. Aside from being a high school student, I'm also a newly ascended god with partial authority. If I were to take you to another world, you'd first need to become my follower. Follower? You mean like a vampire's familiar in light novels? As an illustrator deeply immersed in light novel tropes, Mio instantly associated follower with vampire familiars. Over the past 2 years, she came to understand Shirakawa's personality very well. He wasn't a bad person. Otherwise, he wouldn't have helped her and her daughter Sagiri so much. Something like that. But definitely more advanced than vampires. Once you become my chosen of pleasure, you'll gain extraordinary power and can select a profession. Even adventuring in other worlds will be no problem. At this point, the mood was perfectly set. Shirakawa didn't intend to hide anything about his identity and gazed seriously at the beautiful widow before him. Her lashes trembled slightly. A faint blush bloomed on her pale cheeks. Not only did she have the mature charm of a housewife, there was also the shy timidity of a maiden. Under his gaze, Mio could feel her heart pounding uncontrollably. Emotions long buried under work began to resurface. She wanted to avert her eyes. But it was so difficult now. Shirakawa's refined and handsome face carried a fatal charm. She gently nodded, smiling as she asked, then, Shirakawa-kun, what's the cost? You'll have to offer your body, your soul, and your faith. All your loyalty. To me. In return, I will grant you the title of Chosen of Pleasure. The words body and soul were emphasized just a bit too much. Mio's face instantly turned bright red. Though she had no experience in that area, how could she not catch Shirakawa's implied meaning? So, should she make that choice? Shirakawa-kun had helped her so much. She couldn't think of any way to repay him. And now he was inviting her to be his follower. She bit her lip. A sweet romantic fantasy. How could she not want it? Even if even if he was a high school student? With that thought, Mio slowly stood up, her slightly trembling hands reaching up to wrap around Shirakawa's neck. She softly whispered by his ear, "Shirakawa-kun. Please. Let me become your chosen of pleasure. You may. And also." Remembering that Sagiri was still at home, Mio panted slightly. Just saying these words had drained all her courage. Her voice was soft. "And also. Please send Sagiri a message saying I'm busy tonight and she should sleep early. After that, Shirakawa-kun, please do as you wish. You're free to use the kitchen as you please." Chapter 97, Izumi Mio's Concern? A ghost encounter for Haruno. Anyone who's had intimate interactions with both girls and mature women knows, the easiest way to tell them apart? Slap a girl on the butt. She'll probably just give you a confused look. But a mature woman? She'll kindly help you figure out a better way to do it next time. That's the kind of feeling Izumi Mio gave Shirakawa. Despite being a gentle widow, she was completely untouched. Pure, almost like a maiden. The barrier between them. Absolutely real. Including the physical proof of that status. Red, and unmistakable. At this moment, Shirakawa felt a bit strange. Thoughts swirled in his mind. Sagiri and Mio looked like they came from the same mold. You could basically rule out any possibility of adoption. Noticing the odd look on Shirakawa's face, Mio blushed deeply and hesitantly explained, "Sagiri really is my daughter. But she's from my late husband. We never really had that kind of relationship. Sagiri was born via in vitro fertilization because of some health issues. A widow blessed with the aura of an innocent girl. You could say she was the ultimate fusion of all attack speed attributes. Especially when paired with Mio's naturally beautiful face, taking her in as a chosen of pleasure was definitely the right move. By granting her a portion of his divine authority, he could effectively boost her physical abilities. At the very least, her combat strength would increase a bit." With that thought, Shirakawa decisively activated his skill. A pink glow. Divine energy gathered in his palm. The entire living room was soon enveloped in an ambiguous atmosphere. Even the not-so-skilled in housework Mio fully let loose. She seized control of the final battle. Smooth. Very smooth. The ritual to make Izumi Mori chosen of pleasure wrapped up around midnight. Thanks to Shirakawa's maxed-out Exorcist stamina. A constant stream of holy light purified her soul completely. And since she kept overflowing with it, the overall result was pretty great. Especially after becoming a superhuman. All her fatigue from pulling all-nighters drawing manga, including her dark eye circles, instantly vanished. Even her entire mental state saw a dramatic improvement. This moment, Izumi Mio had truly become a radiant and stunning woman. Bright. As sweet as a ripe peach. From now on, you're officially a superhuman. At least in our world, you won't have to worry about ghosts or evil spirits. Shirakawa's eyes fell on Mio, who was diligently cleaning up the remnants of the battlefield. Occasionally, her teeth grazed something lightly. Not bad. And he hadn't forgotten to remind her. Evil spirits still existed in this world. He pointed at a wooden box placed a short distance away and spoke casually, "Mio nay, becoming a superhuman is only the starting point. From here, you can choose a power system from one of the many worlds. Use that as a foundation to grow stronger. Right now, you can pick the path of an adventurer. Once you do, you'll be able to select a class." A class? That faint scent. Like whore milk. But Mio liked how he now addressed her. From auntie to Mrs. And now, big sister. Mio rinsed her mouth with barley tea but, finding no trash bin, had to swallow it down. She shifted her gaze toward the wooden box on the table. To become a superhuman. And to choose a class. That held immense appeal to her. But the idea of abandoning Sagiri to live in another world? She didn't even consider it. If anything was troubling her now, it was that becoming a superhuman meant she had left the category of ordinary human. According to Shirakawa-kun, her soul had ascended into subspace, where she'd no longer be bound by aging, sickness, or death. Immortality. In every sense of the word. But what about her daughter, Sagiri? That was something Izumi Mio couldn't ignore. Becoming a chosen of pleasure required offering up one's body, soul, and faith. Isn't this just like those mother-daughter scenarios in novels? Her focus wasn't on choosing a class anymore. Staring at the globe-like apparatus on the table, her mind was elsewhere. What's wrong? Noticing something off about Mio, Shirakawa asked with concern. It's just. Shirakawa-kun, are you saying that once the soul ascends to subspace, you achieve a state of immortality? Is that right? She voiced the confusion in her heart, looking to Shirakawa for clarity. More or less. Time doesn't really exist in subspace, and the energy there will gradually elevate your life form classification. It's essentially eternal life. When it came to chosen of pleasure, Shirakawa didn't hide the truth. This was the reward for offering everything. But seeing Mayo's heavy expression, he suddenly realized the real issue. He forced a wry smile and asked, "This is about Saigiri, isn't it?" Mayo shot him a sharp glare, though her flushed cheeks made her look even more charming. Birth, aging, sickness, and death. Especially when it involved close family. It was unbearable to even think about. But now, it was something she had to face. In the end, after a moment of silence, she said in a slightly resigned tone, "If I had known it would be like this, I shouldn't have agreed to it, Shirakawa-kun. If immortality means I'll be separated from Saigiri, then you take care of Saigiri." Shirakawa, mother-daughter combo. Are you for real? In a way, he had gotten Mayo's approval. And that idea? It definitely piqued his interest, though he didn't let it show too much. He shifted his gaze to the adventurer assessment device on the table. "Let's choose your class first." Meanwhile, for Haruno, dinner that night wasn't exactly enjoyable. First, there was Shirakawa's innocent demeanor. But in the end, he totally redefined her view of high schoolers. Even on a supposed long vacation, he could respond to her calmly without flinching. At the very least, she couldn't imagine someone like Hayama Hayato, the same age as Yukino, handling things this well. How interesting. That was the highest praise she could give Shirakawa. And the key was that she knew he had some kind of connection to her sister Yukino at school. Haruno curled her lips into a smile. She stepped out from the back seat of the Rolls-Royce. Even after drinking, her mind remained clear. She was about to return to her stifling home when her eyes caught something in the distance. A shadowy figure hiding near a vending machine. Dark mist oozed from its body. The stench was strong even from afar. At first, Haruno didn't think much of it, but as a breeze passed by, the shadow slowly turned its head, revealing a hideous, rotting face. The gust of wind instantly blew away all the alcohol haze from Haruno's body. Her expression froze completely. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. What the hell? What is that? Chapter 98, Mira, did I just interrupt your playtime? When the evil spirit turned around, with its decayed, twisted, and stinking face, even Haruno, with her strong mental fortitude, was stunned. The slight drunkenness from earlier vanished immediately. Behind her, the Rolls-Royce that had dropped her off was already parked in the garage. She had no idea how to react. Fortunately, the evil spirit hadn't noticed her yet. It should be fine. Right? Haruno glanced at the street behind her. There were clearly more evil spirits roaming about. She had no intention of turning back. She had to steel herself. Home was the safest place. She walked toward her villa. Every time she passed a spirit, her nerves tightened to the max. And then, she noticed something strange. One evil spirit suddenly turned its head. You can see me?" Even after growing up with elite education, Haruno had a high mental threshold. But when the evil spirit spoke to her directly, she had to force herself not to panic. And left right away. She opened the door with a fingerprint lock and shut it. Only after confirming that the spirit didn't rush in could she finally breathe again. That tight tension in her chest slowly eased. Ignoring the housekeeper's questions, Haruno locked herself in her bedroom. She tried to calm herself down. But it wasn't working. She grabbed a bottle of red wine from the cabinet and poured herself a full glass, trying to drown the memory of what just happened in alcohol. But no matter what she did, the horrifying imagery played in her mind again and again. She couldn't make sense of it. What the hell? Why can't I even get drunk at a time like this? Choose a class. Shirakawa gave a simple explanation of the class system, naturally using the framework of the Konosuba world system. As for what class Izumi Mori would awaken to, he wasn't particularly curious. He had already obtained a godlike profession, especially after opening a subspace. In a sense, that had already disrupted his original plans regarding his blank profession panel. It could now provide attribute stats and new skills. As a golden finger mechanic, it was something that definitely had to be utilized. When it came to choosing a profession, it would be better to consider something more powerful. Something that used genetic energy to activate magic-powered devices. This incredibly precise globe. Glowing light swept across Izumi Mori's palm. Eventually, a blue glow etched itself onto the adventurer's card, recording all her detailed attributes. For now, Shirakawa didn't immediately go to find Saigiri to help her become a chosen of pleasure. Instead, he chose to head to the Apocalypse world to face Asdeath's challenge. Was he nervous? Not really. It was one of the modern worlds suitable for assimilation. Whether it could expand his subspace, that was the more important question. Izumi Mori profession, unassigned current status, chosen of pleasure level, 1 constitution, 2.1 agility, 1.7 strength, 1.5 stamina, 2 magic, 40 skills. Since she hadn't yet officially changed classes, her skill set was still a blank slate. As for her physical condition, it was likely due to the infusion of subspace energy. For someone like her who stayed up all night drawing, this was already quite an improvement. Shirakawa casually glanced over her adventurer card and spotted a profession he had considered a while back. Adventurer. It definitely had its advantages. The profession allowed one to learn any skill from any class without restriction. The downside was that it required a large amount of SP points. Even if he used the Konosuba Worlds panel to change class, he would likely still have to follow that world system. But with his Golden Finger profession panel, that problem could be ignored. The only issue was that Aqua hadn't found anyone qualified for the adventurer profession. Shirakawa cleared his thoughts and turned to Izumi Mayo, asking in a relaxed tone, with the chosen of pleasure status boosting you, you've got access to a lot of class. What would you like to pick? Is there manga artist? When it came to adventuring in another world, Izumi Mori wasn't particularly interested. Her current career was her passion, and more importantly, she had a daughter, Sagiori, who still needed her in the real world. There's no such thing. Shirakawa quickly glanced through the adventurer card. Of course, there wasn't any profession like that. Most were either combat-oriented or utility-based. He was about to recommend something when Mayo handed the decision-making back to him without hesitation. Then, Shirakawa-kun, I'll leave it to you. Please choose the profession you think will help you the most. He hadn't expected Mayo to be so thoughtful. Like handing a pillow to someone right when they're sleepy. Shirakawa was pleasantly surprised and smiled. Alright then, let's go with adventurer. Okay. I just swiped to confirm, right? Once the profession was selected, Mayo didn't feel any particular change. She curiously looked at Shirakawa. It seemed like a pretty basic class to her. Still, the boost to her body alone already felt like a huge blessing. Detected profession, adventurer. Would you like to proceed with the class change? As Izumi Mayo successfully changed professions, a notification appeared in Shirakawa's Golden Finger panel. This was a powerful profession to enhance combat capability. No reason not to choose it. He immediately activated the blank profession panel. Once the class info was entered, a detailed status panel appeared before his eyes. Profession 6, Adventurer Level 1, 0 out of 10,000, Core Skill, Unlimited Learning, Max, Base Skills, The base skill list was still empty. But what really mattered was the core skill, Unlimited Learning. Just with this alone, the potential power of the profession was practically limitless. Finally, I've got another way to boost my combat capabilities. As it stood, his combat options were mostly limited to explosion magic and the holy energy projection from his holy sword wielder profession. Not much else. As for the subspace storm, that world-altering corruption hadn't yet been tested in practice. But now, skills like Misaka Mikoto's electricity or Aqua's array of divine magic could all be learned via the adventurer class's unlimited learning ability. Just then, the sound of the front door opening. Wearing her JK school uniform, Miro Yumiko returned home looking exhausted. As she turned on the lights, she was greeted by the sight of Shirakawa and Izumi Mayo, the latter dressed a little too scantily. Even though she had mentally prepared for this kind of scene, the corner of Yumiko's mouth still twitched as she asked. I'm not interrupting your playtime, am I? Chapter 99, even Hiratsuka-sensei isn't spared? Mastering divine authority completely. No. This situation couldn't really be called getting caught. At most, just a case of unfortunate timing. As for pulling Yumiko into anything, Shirakawa had no such intentions. With a calm expression, he asked, why did you come back so late? I thought you were staying at Ebina's place or maybe with Yuigahama. It was clearly a case of throwing the blame back. Yumiko rolled her eyes slightly, not bothering to press the issue of current husband acting suspiciously. She didn't expect to ever have complete control over Shirakawa. He could bestow extraordinary power upon others. As a god, even without considering his romantic ties in other worlds, just within this one. Despite knowing the price, there would still be countless women eager to become supernatural beings. So you've just been working on leveling up your adventurer class? Haven't seen you in a while. You've been busy with this the whole time? Shirakawa's eyes showed a flash of confusion. He glanced toward the flustered and visibly awkward Mayo. Was it possible she really had been doing it all day? He didn't bother maintaining the facade of a pure high school boy. As a god of pleasure who controlled his own subspace, being misunderstood like this was only natural. He shook his head slightly and said, I've been handling business in other worlds. Oh, and Hiratsuka-sensei moved into our apartment building. If you think taking the train to Sobuhai is a hassle, you can hitch a ride with her. If you happen to run into any evil spirits, help her out a little. Just tell her you're a chosen of the god of pleasure. She'll understand. Yumiko's expression grew even stranger. She was somewhat familiar with Izumi Mayo, having run into her a few times in the elevator. Always with her daughter. Sometimes she even helped clean the apartment a little. And now? Even the homeroom teacher didn't escape his grasp. She couldn't help but tug at the corner of her mouth, realizing her understanding of Shirakawa had been completely refreshed. Alright then. Is there anything else? No. After taking care of arrangements in the real world, Shirakawa had no intention of lingering further. He quickly washed up and changed into a fresh set of clothes. When it came time to fulfill his promise with Kayaba Akihiko in the world of Sao, he confirmed something important: as long as a world had a network pathway connected to theirs, those chosen by the god of pleasure could enter the subspace and continue teleporting from there. They could follow him into other worlds. This solved the issue where characters like Miyamoto Rei and Takagi Saya couldn't travel between worlds. Now, his bigger concern as a god was understanding the full scope of his combat capabilities and how to expand the range of his subspace. If using the Warhammer 40k model, then increasing divine power was tied to emotion. Whether positive or negative, all emotions had value. But if taken to the extreme, the resulting outcome could only be a chaos god. When emotion is pushed to the limit, it causes corruption, dragging the soul into the abyss and leading to extreme behavior. That's what defines an evil deity. This really might get tricky. Now that he possessed a subspace and had fully mastered divine authority, Shirakawa had yet to examine how his stats had changed. Profession 5, God Attribute, Pleasure Authorities, Circle of Avidity, Circle of Gluttony, Circle of Carnality, Sickle of Paramountcy, Sickle of Vainglory, Circle of Indolency Followers, 0 Chosen, 13 Sub-Gods, 0 Core Skills, Divine Blessing, Ecstasy Domain, Authority of Carnal Discipline, Power of Faith, Warp Storm Basic Skills, Divine Mark, Level 3, Faith Extraction, Level 1, Blessing. Attribute Boost, Level 1, Blessing. Luck Boost, Level 1. The current job panel, especially the authorities, was now fully mastered, and their effects were easy to understand. Give wealth to the poor, gourmet feasts to the rich who feel spiritually empty, uninhibited indulgence in lust, ambition to those desiring power. Grant authority based on each individual's desires. Let them taste a heaven of pleasure. And a hell born of it. Over time, this would slowly corrupt their souls, ultimately turning them into believers. It feels like this mostly affects the soul. Shirakawa skimmed over the panel. Finally, his gaze locked onto the newly acquired core skill, Warp Storm. Upon tapping it, detailed information appeared. Warp Storm, consume the current area and transform it into a chaotic domain linking the warp with the real universe. Going by this, am I going to have to build an army of Slaanesh-style followers? As for whether the god profession could overthrow a nation, the idea seemed to be replacing that country with a warp-infused domain, right? With that thought, Shirakawa couldn't help but twitch his lips. He hadn't been a god for long, yet already had this level of power. It was a massive leap forward. He didn't continue focusing on the profession panel. He'd test the results in the Apocalypse world soon enough. Opening the dimensional group chat. Just as he was about to use the interworld teleport anchor to go there, he noticed the daily check-in was available. Normal high school student has completed today's check-in. Gained 17 points, not a bad number of points. Still a bit short for the surprise blind box though. Just as he was about to ignore the bustling chat and head out, a flashing private message caught his eye. The sender was marked, Railgun. Misaka Mikoto. What could she want with him? After Bujoja Misako's rescue mission, he hadn't had much interaction with her. Yet now she reached out to him. Railgun, did you accept Asdeath's challenge? Short and to the point. No honorifics, no fluff. Shirakawa replied without hesitation, yeah. I've made some improvements recently and wanted to see what I'm capable of. After sending the message, there was no reply. Even her avatar turned gray. Offline. Shirakawa chuckled and shook his head. Then, he activated the teleport anchor and locked onto Bujoja Misako's location in the Apocalypse world. If corruption was to begin, then starting with a world steeped in despair was perfect? Chapter 100, Bujoja Misako and the others power up. Testing the creation of a chaotic domain. The last time Shirakawa visited the Apocalypse world was at Rika's detached house. Now, seeing Sako and the girls again. After days of adventuring, the change in them was obvious. They now had broader perspectives and greater awareness. Sako no longer seemed haunted by her inner darkness. In fact, as one of his chosen of pleasure, Her combat awareness had significantly improved. That all felt good. Rei and Saya had also made clear progress. While Shizuka remained a bit airheaded, she was definitely more mature. The first to notice Shirakawa's arrival was Rei. Having become a supernatural being and class changed to marksman, the vast world and sense of power had made her utterly devoted to Shirakawa. The moment she saw his familiar figure at the door, her eyes lit up with joy, and she respectfully said, "Shirakawa-sama, you're here." "Yeah. Just wrapped up things in the other world." She bent to get his indoor slippers, her loose clothing revealing her voluptuous curves, hair draped across her shoulders. From his high vantage point, Shirakawa could take in everything. Saya, Rika, and Alice soon rose from the living room. It had been days since they'd last met. Now, seeing the god who had changed their fates, their eyes glowed with excitement. Compared to the others, the more airheaded Shizuka quietly sidled up beside Shirakawa and wrapped her arms around his. Her generous chest pressed tightly against him. She leaned in to sniff his neck, then nodded to herself and said, "No scent of other women." It really seems like Shirakawa-sama was busy these past few days. Getting checked for cheating even in the apocalypse world was not what Shirakawa expected. He calmly glanced around at the women and casually asked, "How's progress been these last few days? What level have your adventurer classes reached?" The girls didn't answer aloud. They simply handed him their adventurer cards. As the levels increased, so did the experience requirements. But leveling through killing zombies was tough. Glancing over their levels and skills, he saw they were all around level 7. Proof that they hadn't been slacking off. Despite the limited EXP from zombies, their effort was evident. Shirakawa felt satisfied. As a beginner training ground, the apocalypse world had fulfilled its purpose. Next, it would be time for a more advanced training field, Inkrad, which was still stored in the subdimension. The average level there was around 15. And after that, the world of Danmaki. That was the plan for now. He handed back the adventurer cards and smiled, praising them. "Once you all hit level 10. Next up. I'll take you to other worlds." Saya's eyes lit up at his words. Her parents had died in the outbreak, and with the world crawling with the undead, she had little reason to stay here. The idea of going to other worlds stirred her. She quickly asked, "Shirakawa-sama, what's it like?" "The other worlds are much more exciting than this one," Shirakawa replied. "It'll be an opportunity to grow stronger. I think you'll all enjoy it." He didn't explain too much. Instead, he controlled the subdimension channel and began linking the apocalypse world. Since it was merely a zombie-filled world without native gods, there was no need to worry about detection. Link established. As the master of the subdimension, Shirakawa summoned all of the Chosen of Pleasure. In the blink of an eye, his figure disappeared from Rika's home. He didn't give Zuko, Saya, and the others a chance to react. Their bodies were instantly transported into the vast and jade-like warp space. It felt like a paradise, filled with energy. Even breathing here brought a refreshing clarity of mind. Zuko's eyes were filled with disbelief. She could still somewhat understand using the dimensional chat group to travel to other worlds. But this. Without any warning, they were brought to a strange world. She took in the sight of a luxurious palace, eerily silent, where even footsteps echoed. Her gaze ultimately landed on what lay ahead. A divine staircase of overwhelming height. At the top of the stairs was a glowing golden throne, and there sat a familiar figure lazily reclining atop a golden seat. Despite Shirakawa usually being easy to get along with and often neglecting his divine identity, now that they were in his domain. As they looked up at that golden-eyed figure, his divine presence was overwhelming. It was as if they were gazing directly into vast, indescribable chaos. "Welcome to Subdimension, Chosen of Pleasure," Shirakawa said casually. This confirmed his theory. Those chosen could arrive in Subdimension via the network tunnel. And from there travel to other worlds. His golden pupils radiated divine purity as he looked at the women and calmly said, "Your souls will be marked within warp space. As the god of pleasure, I will grant you eternal life." Eternal life. Becoming superhuman was already foreign territory for them. The concept of eternal life was even more bewildering. They exchanged uncertain glances. Shirakawa didn't explain further. He imprinted a portion of their souls into subdimension and wrapped them in energy to form chaos cores. As long as the core remained intact, even if they were killed unexpectedly in the Danmaki world by strong monsters, the warp energy could instantly rebuild their bodies. It would happen in a flash. Shirakawa stepped down from the golden throne and approached the girls, smiling as he explained, "This is my world. I call it Subdimension. Here, time and physical laws don't exist. Your souls will live forever. You can take some time to adjust. I have matters to attend to." Without addressing the stunned expressions of the women, Shirakawa used the dimension network and returned to the apocalypse world, gazing up at the pitch-black sky. As he released mana, the dark sky shimmered with twisted red and orange auras formed by raw power. He wanted to see whether creating a chaotic domain could expand subdimension. Chapter 101, Minami Rika, when you said rest, you didn't mean an orgy, did you? As vast warp energy flooded the world, pure chaotic and distorted power began transforming the area. The pitch-black night sky, warped by psychic energy, turned into a bizarre or-like scene. The warp pathway expanded continuously, forming a dimensional rift. As the creator of this domain, the warp storm didn't affect Shirakawa at all. He stood in the tide of psychic energy, observing the changes around him. To him, the apocalypse world held no special meaning. Ravaged by the undead virus, its survivors were in despair. So using this area as a test site to turn it into a chaotic domain, the veil between two worlds began to fade. The space here overlapped, and the real world would soon be engulfed by warp tides. With dimensional perception, he could see strange, surreal sights, like the place had been corrupted by Cthulhu-like forces. Yet those entering wouldn't feel anything was wrong. All of warp space is mine. Even this raw energy. It likely carries complex emotions. Any life form entering this area should have their souls slowly corrupted by my authority. The warp storm engulfed the entire street. Shirakawa glanced around. Though the area had been consumed and turned into a chaotic domain, it still looked like a normal city. The most obvious change was that the surrounding greenery had grown wildly under the nourishment of warp energy, reaching exaggerated, twisted sizes. They looked strange and grotesque, yet held an eerie allure. There wasn't direct lethality, but the most terrifying part was the subtle change in soul and faith. The corruption could silently shift allegiances. If one's willpower wasn't strong enough, they could be corrupted the moment they entered the chaotic domain. That should be enough. He didn't linger further. Those whose souls were deeply corrupted would become the first basic believers of the Church of Pleasure. What kind of power boost they might gain? Shirakawa wasn't entirely sure yet. But this helped him better understand the nature of the warp storm, skill and his various divine authorities. It wasn't suited for direct combat. A bit abstract. He muttered. Of course. That applied to the nature of the power. The authority of Slaanesh-like divinity was more about corruption than raw strength. If he had to force it into a combat context, he could corrupt a targeted attack with psychic energy and then detonate it with explosion magic. The difference between mana and warp energy might be strong enough to trigger nuclear-level devastation. Shirakawa shook his head. Since Sako, Shizuka, and the others were still in subdimension, he vanished from the spot and reappeared inside the palace. Seated again upon the golden throne, his consciousness swept through the entire warp space and quickly located the girls, who were exploring the structures around the Palace of Pleasure. He wasn't in a rush to go to another world. For now, they'd train inside the floating tower of Inkrad until their levels increased. Once their power was high enough. It's about time. Shirakawa vanished from the golden throne again and appeared before the women. Though the subdimension had no concept of time, a black sun still hung overhead. With a thought, night instantly fell over the subdimension. As the creator of this realm, Shirakawa transported Sako, Shizuka, and the others to the starting town of the original Sao world. The players had been forcefully logged out, but the NPCs remained. Moreover, with the virtual game world now transformed into real dimension, those NPCs no longer existed as digital data. They had condensed energy and become real individuals. True residents of the subdimension. Even without deliberately fostering belief, the very existence of warp energy and subdimension itself belonged to Shirakawa. Everything would be loyal to the god. In a more accurate sense, subdimension residents were given independent thought. But if any refused to be loyal, they'd simply be remade. As Shirakawa led Sako, Shizuka, and the others through the starting town, the streets were quiet at night. A medieval European town with a gaming aesthetic. Bathed in moonlight, it had a unique beauty. For the chosen of pleasure, Shirakawa explained patiently. This is the starting town. If you want convenience while living in subdimension, you can stay here. Or you can reside in the Palace of Pleasure. As for what comes next. He paused slightly, then pointed toward the distant floating tower of Inkrad and casually explained that's the floating tower. Inkrad. Anyway. Improving your strength is up to you. His gaze swept across the various expressions on the girls' faces. Only at the end did he notice Alice, who had followed them into the subspace. Everyone present had already become chosen of pleasure and switched to adventurers, with room for growth. But Alice had entered this place as an ordinary person, giving her the status of a chosen of the god of pleasure. Putting aside the most crucial issue for now, doesn't this count as child labor? Shirakawa-sama, so we don't need to go back to our original world anymore? Saya blinked as she looked around at the otherworldly style of Sao. Her eyes were full of curiosity as she asked about their next steps. Staying in the original world was really boring. No TV, no phone signal, fighting zombies was dull, basically just steamrolling in teams. Now, entering a brand new subspace, she was filled with curiosity about what lay ahead. And Shirakawa had said before. Once their level reached a certain standard, they could even visit other worlds. Pretty much. Shirakawa responded without hesitation. Unless someone truly had no interest in improving their strength, returning them to the real world would be no problem. They could even go back to living a normal life. As the creator of this subspace, he was fully aware of all the rules, and he knew the changes monsters would undergo once Sao was reconstructed in the real world. Even though safety wasn't an issue, he still explained, the monsters in Inkrad are condensed from warp energy. They'll be a bit stronger overall. After defeating them, you'll absorb pure warp energy, which helps improve your strength. The girls, who had still been in relatively cheerful moods, suddenly turned serious upon hearing that. Becoming adventurers was already a huge blessing. Now, being brought into a divine subspace created by a god. This represented absolute trust. Even though they hadn't been with the team long. Rika had just wanted to say something. Time's almost up. Let's head to the Palace of Pleasure and rest first. Her vision shifted rapidly, returning them directly to the Palace of Pleasure. Looking at Shirakawa's calm expression, her next thought made her cheeks flush instantly. Rika really wanted to ask. Was this rest actually just rest? Or was it going to be another group orgy? Chapter 102, You're Spot On. Asuna logs back into Sao in the subspace. None of the Chosen of Pleasure could hide their thoughts from Shirakawa. When Rika had that fleeting thought, he glanced at the purple-haired, slightly tanned mature woman with a playful look in his eyes. Faced with this teasing gaze, Rika was briefly stunned, her mind blank. When she snapped out of it, she immediately realized something was off. Could it be? None of their thoughts could be hidden from Shirakawa. It felt like secretly gossiping about your boss behind their back. And being caught red-handed. Especially when that boss was incredibly lenient. A god. With an awkward expression, she quickly apologized. Sorry, Shirakawa-sama. Why are you apologizing? Because I was thinking not so great things about you. When facing problems, Rika had never been one to run away. She knew when to own up to things. Her explanation was vague under the gaze of the other girls. After all, ever since she'd been made one of the Chosen of Pleasure, Shirakawa had rarely come to their world. Let alone any actual orgy. There was no way to clear up this kind of misunderstanding. But what happened next was something Rika hadn't expected. In the Palace of Pleasure, with the atmosphere turning somewhat delicate, Shirakawa didn't seem to mind. In fact, it had been a long time since he'd had a proper orgy. His gaze landed on Rika. He spoke casually, You're talking about the orgy thing? All I can say is, you're spot on about the god. The corners of Rika's mouth twitched uncontrollably. Noticing that Alice had also been teleported over, she sighed while asking, What about her? Put her in one of the empty rooms in the palace. I've been busy handling things in other worlds lately, so I haven't paid much attention to your strength progression. Tonight, we need to have a proper training session. Shirakawa's gaze briefly swept over the girls. Alice was fine for nurturing type development, but if she started heading down a prison type path, that'd be a big problem. It came from his concern for their overall strength. With a great mission resting on their shoulders, this battle would decide the entire lineup. No matter how powerful their opponents were. Could they win? Nah, they would. Rika remained silent. Seeing the completely innocent Alice, she showed no particular reaction. Bending down slightly, she patiently explained, Alice, I'll take you to rest first, okay? We adventurers need to test how much we've improved lately. I'll come back to you later. Okay. Alice, naturally well-behaved, didn't show any curiosity about how they tested their strength. After surviving countless zombie sieges, she knew it was thanks to Rika, Siko, and others, as well as those fantasy powers like in picture books. She understood that in key moments like this, she absolutely couldn't become a burden. A smile appeared on her young face. As she turned away, her gaze passed over the figure seated on the golden throne. With Alice present, Siko, Saya, and the others remained somewhat reserved. But after she left, they all exchanged glances. As for what was about to happen, they were already quite familiar. Their eyes swept across the spacious temple. It didn't look like the kind of place for that sort of activity, so the specific arrangement ahead was still a bit unclear. But Shizuka, who was naturally airheaded, didn't seem to mind the suggestive atmosphere at all. As she climbed the divine staircase in her loose clothes, The old shoulders showed surprising agility. Her oversized lounger kept slipping off, revealing her flawless white body. She proactively went to the golden throne and hugged Shirakawa. Her ample chest constantly smothered his arm with exaggerated softness. The other girls, influenced by the divine nature of the god of pleasure, were not just craving combat. Their desire to stick close to the god had also grown stronger. Even normally reserved girls like Siko and Saya started pouting after seeing this scene. Unfair. When Rika returned to the main hall and saw the sight before her, she finally understood the meaning behind the palace's name. True ultimate pleasure. For Yuki Asuna, this period had indeed been fulfilling. Trapped in Sao, then joining the dimensional chat group. She met Shirakawa, who rescued her. That experience changed her perspective on the future. She no longer wanted to follow the path arranged by her parents, as that was not the life she wanted. What Asuna wanted was to walk her own path. And so, she chose to defy her parents, clearly expressing her refusal in the hospital ward. She wanted to live her own life. And this was the result. It was a bit frustrating. The tragic deaths in the death game incident were used as a reason by Asuna's strict mother, Yuki Kyoko, to strongly criticize virtual reality games. With no other option, Asuna waited until late at night, took the virtual game login terminal, and caught a cab to her classmate and close friend Tozawa Misumi's house. They had arranged this in advance. Upon arriving in Misumi's bedroom, Asuna finally understood why Misumi, as a game otaku, had been able to adapt so quickly to Sao. Looking at her outfit, she wore a relaxed JC-style school uniform, black knee-high socks paired with round-toed brown leather shoes. She was already fully prepared. Ready to return to the Sao world. Misumi asked curiously, Asuna, are you sure? Using a VR terminal, your whole body can actually enter the Sao game world? Yes. I don't really know how to explain it. Asuna nodded seriously. But what I can say for certain is, Shirakawa-kun. He would never lie to us. Alright. Misumi had wanted to ask how Asuna got to know Shirakawa, but she quickly dismissed the thought. Taking a deep breath, she placed the VR terminal on her head. Once she started it up, the familiar login screen appeared, but without any options. Bathed in light, Misumi waited as her consciousness gradually stabilized. When she slowly opened her eyes, she found herself in a world both familiar and dramatically changed. She was completely stunned. Trying to confirm, she pinched the soft flesh of her arm. Asuna immediately inhaled sharply and looked at her with suspicion. Asuna, I think we've really arrived in another world, haven't we? Chapter 103, Asuna's Otherworldly Journey. Even Yua shows up. Asuna rubbed her sore arm from where Misumi had pinched her. She rolled her eyes at her friend standing beside her. Verifying whether they had truly entered another world was understandable. But did she really have to pinch her arm? She grumbled silently and kept her thoughts to herself. She surveyed the familiar starting town of Sao. Asuna's eyes were filled with disbelief. The environment had completely changed. Originally, Sword Art Online was made up of countless floating islands. Now it had become a complete world, with vast, endless plains and in the distance, the towering Ankrad that had once struck fear into players' hearts. It was hard to imagine that through a VR terminal, they could now enter a real, transformed alternate world. This is just incredible. Asuna fell silent for a moment before answering the question Misumi had asked earlier. Originally, it had only hosted their consciousness. But now, even their bodies could enter. She didn't understand the mechanism. She bent down and scooped up a handful of dirt. In a digital world created with high-tech equipment. How could this feel so real in such a short time? Not lingering any longer outside the starting town, she and Misumi headed inward. By logic, the NPCs, virtual characters, should still be here, right? Let's check out what's changed in the world. I figure Shirakawa-kun is probably resting now. When he wakes up, he'll probably notice we're here. Asuna took the initiative to make a decision. She didn't mention the dimensional chat group, her eyes filled with anticipation. What awaited her next? Was a true otherworldly journey. Whether she stayed in Sao or traveled to other worlds, including what happened the morning before when she left the game. She had no objections to becoming one of Shirakawa's chosen of the god of pleasure. She knew this was a new path laid before her. She walked alongside Misumi through the starting town. Even though everything had changed dramatically, the original vibe was still there. The night was quiet. No random monster spawns. What caught her attention was a figure squatting in the distance. Asuna's eyes were immediately drawn to her. That's an NPC from Sao. Not exactly sure? Misumi shook her head slightly. She still hadn't fully processed the feeling of truly entering another world. As for the figure ahead, she didn't have many thoughts. The controls were different from Sao. There was no player interface, which meant equipment couldn't be equipped. They were barehanded. As a seasoned gamer, she had to remain cautious. In SAO, you couldn't log out. Here in the subspace, they had no clue how to return. Should we go take a look? We're only 100 meters from the starting town. This should have been the game's safe zone, right? Asuna was simply curious. The NPCs in this world actually lived like humans, and this girl was standing right at the entrance to the town. Most importantly, she trusted Shirakawa with her safety. Since he had said they could return to SAO any time, that meant it was safe. As long as they didn't go to Inkrad, they'd be fine. Approaching, Asuna looked at the girl sitting on the ground. In the real world, she looked like a grade schooler, with long black hair. She wore a light-colored dress. As they drew near, the girl tiredly looked up. Her cute, childish face was full of confusion. "What's your name? Why aren't you resting in the town up ahead? Why are you sitting out here?" She was an adorable little girl. Looked to be about 7 or 8. Asuna didn't try to help her up. She just squatted down beside her and asked curiously. I don't know my name. When I woke up yesterday at noon, I was already here. I walked for a very long time." The girl shook her head, her soft voice full of fatigue. And she was telling the truth. She had woken up in a strange forest. As for why she had walked toward the town, she didn't understand it herself. If Shirakawa had been here, he would have immediately recognized her, the mental support program from the SAO game. And then I got too tired. So I just wanted to rest for a bit. To Asuna and Miss Yumi, she was just a lost stranger. Asuna looked at the girl, then glanced around, unsure whether there was danger nearby. Thinking of that, she smiled gently and said, "We're heading to the starting town too. Do you want to come with us?" A glimmer of joy flashed in the girl's exhausted eyes. She nodded seriously, but her brows furrowed, recalling that she couldn't walk anymore. "Will I be a burden to you?" "Of course not." Asuna smiled and nodded. She felt a strange sense of connection with this girl. Reaching out, she gently held the girl's small hand. It was a warmth only real people could possess. Finally, she looked at Miss Yumi and said casually, "Do you think the inn we stayed at before is still usable? If it is, then we don't have to worry about a place to stay tonight." After finishing today's orgy, Shirakawa, as the creator of the subspace, had unsurprisingly overpowered everyone. He had easily defeated Zuko, Shizuka, and the others. The final defeat CG scene ended with all the girls fainting. For them, the only real danger in the subspace was the floating tower, Inkrad. But as long as their soul cores remained undamaged, no matter how severe the injury, it could always heal. Shirakawa was just about to rest in the warmth of the palace and consider tomorrow's plans, when a warning appeared. An outsider had entered the subdimension, instantly drawing his attention. "Who is it?" Curious, Shirakawa expanded his awareness to cover every corner of the subspace. Nothing could hide from his gaze. Very quickly, his eyes locked onto the two figures using virtual game terminals to link to the subspace through the dimensions gateway, Yuki Asuna and Taizawa Miss Yumi. Heading toward the starting town. He wasn't particularly surprised. What caught his eye was the black-haired little girl walking beside Asuna. You actually manifested as a human? Well, in that case, I've definitely got to go. Chapter 104, The Title of Chosen of Pleasure. Sounds really suspicious. Shirakawa didn't linger in the Palace of Pleasure. Sensing that Asuna and Miss Yumi had already reached the starting town, he descended immediately. For him, this was a trivial matter. Watching the three girls look for a familiar inn as a place to stay, he appeared before them in an instant. His sudden appearance startled both Asuna and Miss Yumi. After all, someone suddenly materializing in front of them at night was bound to be frightening. But once they saw it was Shirakawa, their expressions immediately turned to joy. They had assumed he would already be asleep by now. Asuna had planned to contact him through the dimensional chat group the next morning. Yet they had only just arrived in the new world, barely stepped into the starting town. And here he was. Holding the little girl's hand, Asuna asked curiously, "Shirakawa-kun, how did you know we were here? It's already so late. Have you ever heard of a god needing sleep to restore his energy?" Shirakawa smiled and shook his head. He couldn't exactly say he had just finished an orgy session. His gaze swept to the black-haired girl beside Asuna. Straight-cut bangs and long, silky black hair draped over her shoulders. It was Yue, the program in the original SAO game, designed to assist players with emotional support. What Shirakawa hadn't expected was that, now that the SAO world and the seed of the virtual world had been transformed into a subspace, even non-corporeal NPCs could manifest as real beings. In the subspace, there were no secrets. But since energy-forged life forms didn't have the same external presence as people like Asuna and Miss Yumi, If he hadn't been looking closely, he might have missed her. Still, he didn't dwell on Yu's presence. Any life born in the subspace was part of his creation, citizens of the god of pleasure. He turned his gaze to the two girls before him. Asuna wore casual clothes, while Miss Yumi was still in her school uniform. In terms of looks and personality, each had their own charm. The former had the full wife energy, while the latter was more of the bubbly, energetic girl type. In response to Asuna's question, Shirakawa explained casually, "This is my world. Once I sensed your presence, it wasn't hard to find you." More importantly, he didn't explain further. The fact that they had entered the subspace at night meant they had already made up their minds to pursue a different kind of life. You've already made your choice? Before becoming my chosen of pleasure, there are things you must understand. Above all, you must offer absolute loyalty to your god. Explaining this to middle school girls like Asuna and Miss Yumi felt difficult even for Shirakawa. Things like offering your body, your soul, your faith, your loyalty. Even if the legal marriage age in Japan was 16. Once you make your choice, it cannot be undone. From this moment on, your path will take you to greater, far wider worlds. So, what's your decision? Asuna didn't bring up her family issues. This was her decision. She didn't need anyone else to bear the consequences. She still wore a soft, gentle smile, though her grip on the little girl's hand visibly tightened. She nodded seriously. I've already decided, Shirakawa-kun. Rather than live a life that's been planned out for me, I want a future that's mine to shape. I feel the same. No matter how fun real-life games are, they can't compare. If I can truly experience what's inside the game, that kind of life sounds really exciting. Miss Yumi was much more easygoing. Unlike her friend Asuna, she didn't have any family pressure. Her parents lived overseas and only fulfilled their legal obligations as guardians. If she hadn't met Shirakawa, she would have returned to her quiet, ordinary school life after SAO. But now, an entirely new and thrilling life was right in front of her. As for the decision, Miss Yumi had made it without hesitation. The path ahead will be filled with danger. But as your god, I grant you the right to anchor your souls within the subspace. Shirakawa's brown eyes turned pure gold as divine authority awakened. He gathered the divine mark in his palm. Under its influence, Asuna and Miss Yumi unconsciously lifted their shirts. In simple terms, follow the god, and you shall attain immortality. Asuna couldn't help but feel a strange sense of déjà vu. Like when she was preparing food earlier that day and asked Shirakawa what he liked. And Shinobu had suddenly lifted her shirt on her own, so. Back then, did she misunderstand the situation? Was Shirakawa just bestowing the identity of chosen of pleasure? She didn't focus too much on Shirakawa's words. As his fingers lightly touched her abdomen, Asuna felt a tingly current shoot through her body from her very first contact with the opposite sex. It was as if a pure energy was reshaping her from the inside out. Finally, as a newly anointed chosen of pleasure, she looked down at the dark purple butterfly tattoo on her smooth stomach. Her cheeks turned crimson. She had only ever seen this kind of pattern in image sets while surfing the web. The type she could never admit to. Embarrassed, she quickly covered it with her clothes. She glanced at her friend Miss Yumi beside her. For a moment she held back her urge to say anything snarky. Unlike the mature wife personality, Miss Yumi had more of a girlish mindset. She hadn't even begun to process the physical sensations yet. All her attention was focused on the dark purple butterfly pattern. Unlike Shinobu, she didn't carry any innate reverence for Shirakawa. She blinked thoughtfully. Finally she asked in a calm tone, "Is this what I think it is?" You could say that. Faced with her question, Shirakawa nodded slightly. What he didn't expect was that the girl in front of him, clearly just a middle school JC beauty, would be so blunt with her words. She paused for a moment, then asked directly, "So, are you going to do that kind of thing with us? The thing you're probably thinking about?" Shirakawa-kun, don't worry. Honestly, before I came to your world, I already expected this. After all, just the name chosen of pleasure already sounds super sketchy. Chapter 105, Asuna Yuki's Invitation. Want to rest together? Miss Yumi's teasing had more or less become a small interlude among the chosen of pleasure, seen from a relatively objective standpoint. That name really was a bit. And even though Asuna had some experience, she was still rather shy. Understanding the deeper meaning behind her friend's words, her face turned red. She stammered and fidgeted, not saying a word. Trying to shift the topic, she looked around at the surrounding town. Despite only being away for a short while, she already felt a strange sense of unfamiliarity. Perhaps the world had changed significantly. Almost forgot the introduction. Asuna took the girl's hand and said, "We met her on the way to the starting town. She was lost. She said she doesn't remember much, so I brought her along. The girl looked up, eyes meeting the boy with pure golden irises. She nodded in agreement with most of Asuna's words. But then she shook her head slightly and said softly, "What this sister said is mostly right. But I know you." Her words drew both Asuna and Miss Yumi's attention. They were surprised. The girl had no memories, yet she remembered Shirakawa. She wasn't trying to be mysterious. Her gaze was filled with devotion as she spoke seriously. "You are the great creator of the world. You gave me life. You are the divine emperor seated on the golden throne, who will lead us, your people, to witness the prologue of a new epic legend." Miss Yumi stared at the girl's sincere expression and then looked at Shirakawa. They were around the same age. Or at least appeared that way. It was hard to imagine someone being praised so highly. Even the greatest rulers in games never received such titles. "You don't have a name yet, do you? Creator of the world, the true god who gives life to NPCs, the divine emperor on the golden throne." None of this was really a problem. It was an added effect from modifying Sao and the seed of the virtual world. As for leading the divine kingdom into an epic legends prologue, that wasn't something Shirakawa had ever considered. He looked at the girl, then turned to Asuna. "If you brought her here, then you name her," he said casually. "Huh?" In the dimensional chat group, Shirakawa's nickname was just normal high school student, but Asuna never expected him to have so many grand titles. Suddenly asked to name someone, she was a bit dazed. Once she realized what was being asked, she started thinking seriously. After a moment, her pretty brows furrowed slightly as she asked in confusion, "Shirakawa-kun, how about we call her you?" "Up to you." That kind of relaxed attitude. Like two parents naming their child. Made Asuna's heart race. She bent down and looked at Yue, her voice especially gentle, exuding a warm, nurturing aura. "Then, from now on, your name is Yue, okay?" "Thank you, sister." The concept of a name was vague to Yue, but since it came from the great creator, she saw it as a gift. Her beaming smile said everything about her happiness. "From now on, you'll live with me." Asuna gently patted Yue's head. The simple dress the girl wore was plain, but with some effort, she'd look beautiful. Just as she said that, Asuna realized they hadn't even figured out where to stay. She looked at Shirakawa. "Shirakawa-kun, where should we live?" Shirakawa didn't bother with small details. As more chosen of pleasure gathered, the subspace hadn't changed much. The magic device used for class changes was still in the real world. As for Asuna, Miss Yumi, and now Yue, the eye with a physical form, they needed a place to stay. "There are two choices. You can live in my palace of pleasure or find a house in a starting town. I'll help with your class changes tomorrow." "What's the difference?" Miss Yumi asked curiously. "The palace of pleasure is far away. With your current power, it'd be hard to visit other worlds. The best place to level up is the floating tower, Ankrad." Shirakawa pointed to the towering structure in the distance. "If you stay in the starting town, it'll be easier to level up." "What do you think, Asuna?" After briefly weighing the pros and cons, Asuna nodded. "Shirakawa-kun, let's stay in the starting town. We want to grow stronger as soon as possible." "All right." With a clear answer, Shirakawa looked toward an open field. With a thought, the environment in subspace shifted. Two houses emerged from the empty square, matching the style of the starting town, not standing out too much. "You can live in that one." Looking at the houses that suddenly appeared, Asuna and Miss Yumi went silent. Their eyes showed disbelief. Earlier, when Yue called him the world's great creator, it hadn't fully hit them. But seeing houses form from nothing made them realize what that title meant. Creator of the world. A god who creates everything. "Okay." Asuna led Shirakawa and Yue to the house. The style was warm and inviting. No need to pick, either would do. They chose a cozy detached home. Holding Yue's hand, Asuna looked around and, thinking about living in this unfamiliar world, her eyes were filled with anticipation. "Yue, from now on, this will be our home. See you tomorrow, Asuna." "I'm going to rest now," said Miss Yumi, who had a lot to process after gaining supernatural powers. She waved at her friend, then looked at Shirakawa. "With all due respect, may the great divine emperor look after us." That left Shirakawa standing at the door. Asuna, still an inexperienced girl, had no idea how to handle the situation. After a long pause, her face reddened. Finally, she asked shyly, Would you like to rest together?" Chapter 106, Changes in the Denmuki World, War Game? Is there really something this good? Faced with such an opportunity, Shirakawa naturally wouldn't turn it down. He looked at Asuna and Yue, whom she was holding by the hand. It really gave off the feeling of a young couple with a daughter. The duplicated house came fully furnished. "Ready to move into. You'll be staying here from now on." As for your class changes, I'll bring the magic device over tomorrow. Once you've awakened your powers, get some equipment, and you'll be ready to start conquering Ankrad. Shirakawa had no intention of interfering in Asuna and Miss Yumi's future. As long as their souls remained intact, how strong they could become would be up to them. Alright. Oh, and I've already added Kiki and Yuna's contacts. They still have things to take care of before coming. When alone, Asuna wasn't particularly relaxed. Thinking about this, she decisively informed Shirakawa, mainly as a way to suggest he take a break. She never expected him to actually agree. When they arrive in the subspace, if you're busy with something else, Shirakawa-kun, we can help greet them. The house is big enough. Even if more people stay, it won't be a problem. Then I'll leave that to you. Shirakawa nodded with a smile. With veteran SAO players around, he didn't need to worry too much about subspace matters. If necessary, there was always Suko. After tucking you into bed, he turned to Asuna again. Just as he was about to say something to ease the atmosphere, he saw the girl blushing and avoiding his gaze. What's wrong? Should we go to the room? Or? Asuna fidgeted with the hem of her clothes, her expression awkward. Yua probably wasn't asleep that quickly, and as for that kind of intimate activity, there's no way she didn't understand. The other party was Shirakawa, and truthfully, she had no resistance to him. If anything was puzzling her, it was the fact that the game interface had disappeared. The convenient clothing removal feature was gone. The room, then. Shirakawa naturally didn't reject the girl's invitation. He followed Asuna up to the second floor, and as soon as the door was shut, he saw the girl already taking off her skirt. As she turned around with trembling hands trying to undo her buttons, her entire body shook slightly. Her flushed face said more than words could, and she didn't let the full burden fall on Asuna alone. So, Shirakawa took the initiative to walk over and nimbly undid her white blouse. Even though she was a high school, in terms of figure, Asuna was already comparable to a certain woman named Haruno. Her lashes trembled slightly, and even her voice was shy and uncertain. Please take care of me, Shirakawa-kun. I don't really know how this works. You make it sound like I do. He had just realized it could be taken the wrong way. Asuna was about to respond, but the tingling sensation spreading through her body, and Shirakawa's seamless actions, made her swallow her words. She tried to sit on the bed, but instead, was scooped up by secure and steady arms. The window hadn't been closed, and a cool night breeze occasionally swept in. Feeling a chill, she instinctively tightened her arms around his neck. The pain she was expecting didn't come. Asuna looked up, and with his warm breath brushing against her, their lips gently met. Be gentle. If possible, Shirakawa would have liked to cook dinner with Asuna. Living alone for so long had definitely made him skilled in cooking. His culinary style was a bit different from typical Japanese fare. He specialized in dough-based dishes. For example, when making steamed buns, to get that fluffy texture, there were techniques involved in kneading the dough. One had to knead it thoroughly and add water intermittently. Since the portions weren't large, just 2 dough balls were enough. Using fresh flour. Even during the kneading process, he could catch a whiff of the girl's unique scent. Noodles alone wouldn't suffice. The rest of the dough could be used for noodles too. He wanted Yuki Asuna to taste the noodles he made. Though conditions weren't ideal right now, they were good enough. After fully imparting his noodle-making techniques to her, and even with a physical boost from the chosen of pleasure, the girl eventually fell into a deep sleep. She had completely let go of all stress and anxiety, exposing her defenseless softness to Shirakawa. All she needed to do was enjoy the moment. But Shirakawa had a lot more to think about. In the dimensional chat group, Asdith's challenge still hadn't been answered. Ignoring her indefinitely wasn't really an option. As for actual combat methods, he didn't have many he could openly use. He couldn't just rely on divine powers to lay down various corruption traps, then wait for her to approach the Palace of Pleasure before intervening. That could only serve as a backup plan. The world of Misaka Mikoto. I feel like that one's worth exploring. Now that I have the adventurer job panel, I could learn the skills of every level 5 Esper. If I can just steal a few, they'd make great combat tools. Very quickly, Shirakawa had made up his mind about the next steps. He still had enough points in the dimensional chat group. Of the more powerful worlds, only high school DxD and a certain magical index were left. The others didn't have especially powerful combat techniques. Even in Gabriel Dropout, there wasn't much worth learning. Thanks to the information shielding from the dimensional chat group, he'd managed to sneak into the god-filled Danmiki world unnoticed, and Index wouldn't be any different. He glanced at the now sleeping Asuna and silently made his decision. Just as he was about to rest, a private message alert from the dimensional chat group drew his attention. At the moment, There wasn't anything else happening in the group. Aqua was basically lying flat at this point. So the only one who would message him proactively was probably Shinobu Kacho from the Demon Slayer world. He opened the interface and what appeared before his eyes was a message from Blue Ribbon. Blue Ribbon, are you resting, Shirakawa-kun? Blue Ribbon, there's something I need to tell you. Do you still remember Lilyuka, who joined your familia? She used to be with the Soma familia. Blue Ribbon, they've found out she joined your familia. Blue Ribbon, for some reason, they've declared a war game on your familia. Lily wouldn't tell me at first. I had to press her before she finally admitted it. Chapter 107, Hestia wants to help, Shinobu's sisters resolve war game. Seeing Hestia's message, Shirakawa was genuinely surprised. His plan for Siko and Asuo was to use the subspace to level up as a springboard before diving into the real Danmachi dungeon. As for Lily joining his familia, he had anticipated the Soma familia initiating a war game. Soma familia's captain and real decision-maker, Xanis Lustra, was very interested in Lily's transformation magic. But what he didn't expect was how fast they moved. They must have confirmed that Lily was the only member in the familia and wanted to act while Shirakawa's side hadn't fully developed, aiming to win her as property through the war game. Normal high school student, okay. Blue Ribbon, what do you mean okay? Blue Ribbon, I think Soma familia's only goal is Lily. You're a new familia. Technically, you don't have any assets. Blue Ribbon, if I had more familia members, I'd help you. Blue Ribbon, but right now, it's just my. What should we do? If it really comes to it. Blue Ribbon, should I ask another god's familia for help? What caught Shirakawa off guard was Hestia's attitude. She was willing to help him proactively. The way she'd ask for help would probably involve her kneeling and begging. He couldn't help but laugh and shake his head. His already good impression of Hestia only deepened. Without any intention of hiding things, he replied, normal high school student, I'll handle the war game myself. Normal high school student, it's true that I only have Lily in your world. But that doesn't mean I don't have others in other worlds. Normal high school student, and also. Thanks. Blue Ribbon, as long as you've got other members. I was just passing the message, okay? Don't get the wrong idea. If you get kicked out of Orario. Blue Ribbon, how am I supposed to recruit anyone in the future? He did have to resolve the Danmachi problem. Siko and the others were usable in combat, but Asuna and the rest still needed to grow stronger. And then there was Shinobu from Demon Slayer. If worse came to worst, he could speak to Eris in the Konosuba world and have her send Darkness and Megaman to help out in Orario. With that thought, Shirakawa scanned the dimensional chat group and located the Shinobu's avatar. He opened a private chat and sent a message. Normal high school student, are you free sometime soon? According to real-world time. It was nearly dawn. He wasn't expecting an immediate reply from Shinobu. Besides, the war game allowed for scheduled matchups, so there was no rush. However, just as Shirakawa was about to close the chat group, Shinobu's avatar flashed. She responded immediately. Mistress of the Butterfly State, Shirakawa-sama, is there something you need? Mistress of the Butterfly State, if there's anything I can do, I'd be happy to assist. Normal high school student, one of my familiars in another world ran into some trouble. I can't act there directly. Do you have time to participate in a battle? Mistress of the Butterfly State, no problem. Mistress of the Butterfly State, but is just me really enough? If possible, my sister and even some of the former Demon Slayer Corps members could help too. Normal high school student, your sister should be fine, but traveling to other worlds requires becoming a chosen of pleasure. That depends on her own willingness. Mistress of the Butterfly State, I'll definitely convince her. After replying to Shirakawa, Shinobu jumped up from the tatami mat. The strength she'd gained from becoming a chosen of pleasure was beyond what she could have imagined. Thanks to the dimensional chat group, her future would no longer be confined to her own world. She could now follow in Shirakawa-sama's footsteps. If there was any problem, it was her sister. She didn't want them to be separated. She had been hoping to ask Shirakawa to make her sister a chosen of pleasure as well, but it felt awkward to bring up. Yet now, the opportunity was right in front of her. If I can make Nasan a chosen of pleasure too, then we can go to other worlds together, right? As for helping Shirakawa, that wasn't even something she had to think about. If not for him, she likely would have been killed by Doma back then. She wouldn't even be here now. No matter what Shirakawa needed, she would never hesitate to help him. She opened the door to her room. The sky was just beginning to lighten. Even after leaving the Demon Slayer Corps, her sister kept up her daily training. Finding her sister's silhouette in the courtyard, Shinobu held back her excitement and approached her. Nasan, I have something really important to tell you. Kanikacho turned her head curiously. She turned its iron blade, and smiled gently as she walked over. Ever since Shinobu returned from that other reality, she hadn't smiled like this before. Her tone was especially warm. "What is it, Shinobu? Shirakawa-sama. Do you still remember him?" If she really wanted to explain, she would have to start from the concept of the Chosen of Pleasure. Shinobu recounted how she had traveled to the Sao world to save Asuna. She explained everything, including how Shirakawa was a divine being, and how she had become his follower. Finally, she looked at her sister very seriously, lifting her clothing slightly to reveal the dark purple, otherworldly pattern. She asked directly, "Nei-san, would you like to become a Chosen of Pleasure?" Becoming a Chosen means gaining strength quickly, being able to travel to other worlds, and most importantly, being able to help Shirakawa-sama. As she listened closely to Shinobu's experiences, Kanikacho kept her gentle smile. As for becoming a Chosen of Pleasure, she didn't answer right away. All the demons in the world had been eradicated. Now back to normal life, she'd lost interest in conflict and battle. What she really cared about was what Shinobu said next. Her voice grew serious. "Shinobu, is this because Shirakawa-sama needs help?" "Sort of. To be exact, it's his follower in another world who's in trouble. As a god, Shirakawa-sama can't directly intervene, so he's hoping that..." Before she could finish, Kani was already nodding seriously. She smiled. "It's my honor to help Shirakawa-sama. Besides, Shinobu, if you're going off to fight in another world, then as your big sister, I absolutely have to watch over you." Chapter 108, Heading to the Index World. Misaka Mikoto's expectations before making her final decision, Shinobu hadn't informed Shirakawa. In the Denmuki world, there was still the issue of the Soma Familia. War games required the agreement of both gods to begin. Refusing would only bring shame, and make one's familia a target in Orario. If he wanted a clean resolution, then the best path would be to deal with Soma Familia's captain, Zani's Lustra. Since gods couldn't use divine power in the lower world, that meant Shirakawa could participate directly, as long as he didn't use any godly power. Just like in the original Denmuki, when Freya used charm to alter everyone's perception. That wasn't considered cheating. As long as he didn't directly use divine skills, it wouldn't count as a violation. Besides, he entered Denmuki through the dimensional chat group. So he never signed the so-called divine agreement. Even if he did break the rule, the worst consequence would just be that it had become harder to appear in the Denmuki world again. He wasn't that concerned. This incident would be a good opportunity to let the Chosen of Pleasure meet each other, and see how far everyone had progressed. I should explain the situation to them first. But I need to go to the Index World. I just don't know how many points the identity shielding function will cost this time. It was almost morning now. Sunlight poured through the window. Shirakawa's body no longer felt tired. While there was still time, he decisively opened the dimensional chat group. He looked for his oldest private chat, Misaka Mikoto. The fact that he had already traveled to Siko's world said a lot. Voluntary travel simply required extra points. He sent her a message. "Normal high school student, Mikoto-san, are you free today? I'd like to visit your world for a bit. I hope that's not a bother." "Railgun, it should be. No problem. Railgun, if you're coming, the best time would be after lunch, when school ends. I'm at Tokawadai Middle School in Academy City. Ordinary high schooler, got it. Thanks for your help." In the Index World, inside Academy City, Misaka Mikoto glanced calmly at the chat group and didn't reply further. She looked over at Shirai Kuroko beside her. Kuroko was still packing her laptop and school bag. Tokawadai's dress code required the school uniform, and her tea-colored curly hair had been tied into twin tails with butterfly ribbons, but it looked like she still needed more time to get ready. Mikoto couldn't help urging her. "Kuroko, you're always this slow in the mornings. We'll be late if we don't leave after breakfast." "Coming, An-sama." Packing her phone and laptop into her handbag, Kuroko answered quickly. But she gave Mikoto a strange look. Normally, she wouldn't act like this. Kuroko couldn't help but ask, "An-sama, did something happen? You seem different today." Mikoto lifted her head. Not confused by the question, but wondering if she'd really been that obvious. As for Shirakawa, she was genuinely curious about him. When she first joined the dimensional chat group, he'd become a holy sword wielder incredibly fast. He even participated in rescue missions with other members. At first, she thought it was due to the points-based stat enhancements. She tried it herself, buying a basic stat boost for 100 points. It did help, but not significantly. So she began to wonder, how did Shirakawa get so strong so quickly? Every time he went to another world, he seemed to level up by leaps and bounds. She knew her personality well. She was competitive. Even after joining the chat group, that hadn't changed. She still had confidence in her own power. Now, the one person she was truly curious about was Shirakawa. Just this morning, as she was getting ready for school, she saw his message asking to visit her world. Mikoto felt a faint sense of anticipation. If possible, she wanted to find a quiet place where they could spar without disturbing others. You're overthinking it. But On-sama, your attitude is way off today. Having confirmed the plan to visit the Index world, Shirakawa then made use of his full control over subspace. He transported Siko, Asuna, and the others directly into Ankrad. The floating tower's monster experience mechanics were still intact, though their makeup had been replaced by warp energy. Not just raw data. This would provide real gains for the Chosen of Pleasure. Now that they were all superhumans, their enhanced bodies could endure the dense warp energy. They didn't need rest and could maintain excellent combat states throughout. Before heading to the Danmuki world, Shirakawa didn't forget to use the ability appraisal device from the Konosuba world to assess Asuna and Miss Yumi. He assigned them top-tier classes. Asuna became a sword master to match her flash title, and Miss Yumi, who wielded a scythe, became adjudicator. Once introductions were done, Shirakawa laid out the plan. Your next task is to use Ankrad to quickly reach level 42. In a few days, I'll take you to a real other world, where you'll face your first serious battle test. Siko's eyes gleamed with anticipation. With her powers awakened, fighting was now a thrill. Asuna also showed clear determination. After briefing them on Ankrad's mechanics, and seeing no objections, Shirakawa opened the dimensional chat group, navigated the functions, and purchased a temporary transfer anchor to the Toru Majutsu no Index world. Do you wish to travel to the Toru world? Yes. Chapter 109, Shirai Kuroko. The level upper incident begins. Spend 30 points to conceal identity and existence. Yes. Spending points on concealment was critical. The Toru world was as dangerous as Danmuki, and its magic gods had universe-level power. For safety, Shirakawa didn't hesitate. He didn't know if he could bypass the dimensional walls, but after syncing Ankrad's data, he used the chat group to teleport. He arrived in a shadowy alley without surveillance. The city felt strangely familiar. More futuristic than his real world. Its tech was far more advanced, even using nuclear fusion reactors for power. New class panel confirmed as adventurer. No need for extra panels. I'll separately learn Railgun's electromaster ability. That should work. Kamaju's Imagine Breaker is interesting too. If it can be extracted through the skill proficiency panel, it'd be a major boost. Imagining the scene of shouting your power is nullified while stuffing enemy skills back at them made him chuckle. Time flowed similarly to the Danmuki world. He didn't plan to stay long. Just enough to learn advanced combat techniques, deal with the Soma Familia threat, and face Asdith's challenge in the chat group. He reopened the chat and messaged Mikoto, normal high school student, I'm in your world now, but not sure where exactly. He wasn't familiar with the local timeline, but heading to Tokawadai should work. Unexpectedly, her reply came fast, Railgun. Where are you now? Railgun, or what are you wearing? If there's surveillance nearby, it'll be easier to find you. Reading his message, Misaka turned to Shirai Kuroko. She hadn't expected Shirakawa to arrive so quickly. Just over an hour after their last message. But the timing wasn't ideal. Kuroko, about the level upper case. You're in a rush? We've found some leads. The music likely contains subliminal cues that simulate synesthesia, causing false power increases. At Judgment 177, Kuroko was analyzing the level upper audio. More people were fainting every day. They needed a solution fast. Now they had a rough grasp of the situation. Still unaware of Misaka's subtle change in mood, Kuroko continued, we need to solve this before more people collapse. I'll report this to Teacher Kama to see if we can find a way. By the way, what did you want from me, On-sama? I want your help using Academy City's surveillance to locate someone. He might help with level upper. Of course, Misaka wasn't about to reveal the chat group. Or Shirakawa's otherworld origins. But saying he could help with the incident would fit Kuroko's logic. I messaged him. No reply. Probably out without his phone. Your friend, On-sama? Kuroko muttered to herself. There was no time to dwell on it. Using the description Misaka provided, she quickly accessed the surveillance system. Moments later, the screen locked onto Shirakawa, walking down a street in casual attire. Clearly a high school student. He was quite close to their 177 branch. Kuroko looked at the screen, then at Misaka. This him, On-sama? That's him. Misaka nodded calmly. Getting to him would take time. Unless Kuroko used her teleportation. Can you teleport us to him? No problem. Even in a rush, Kuroko wouldn't pass up a chance to be close to her beloved Misaka. Grinning slyly, She wrapped her arms around her and began teleporting repeatedly, until they appeared on the same street as Shirakawa, who was on his way to Tokuwadai. Kuroko finally saw him in person. Older than her, probably a high schooler. She didn't know how he and Misaka knew each other, but from appearance alone, he was undeniably handsome. His clean-cut features would attract anyone, even from afar. Seeing Misaka suddenly appear with a twin-tailed girl at her side, Shirakawa immediately recognized her. Shirai Kuroko, a level 4 space-type Esper. As Misaka's loyal sidekick, it made sense she'd tag along. He greeted them casually, "Misaka-san. This is my underclassman and roommate, Shirai Kuroko." They hadn't met in a while, but to Misaka, Shirakawa already felt like he'd grown vastly stronger again. Still, she didn't forget to introduce her properly. Her tone was calm as she pursed her lips and said, "Kuroko, this is my friend, Shirakawa. He is currently a high schooler. Upperclassman, I think. He should be able to help with the level upper incident. That is, if Shirakawa is willing to help us." Chapter 110, The Truth Behind Level Upper, A Chance to Copy a Skill. Through Mikoto's explanation, Shirakawa gained a rough understanding of the current storyline in a certain scientific railgun. The main plot was underway. They were in the midst of the level upper arc. Shirakawa was well aware of the situation. The true culprit was Harumi Kama, the one researching the AIM network project. Her intentions weren't evil. She wanted to save the children used in unethical experiments. That was the only way she could help them. But what left the deepest impression on Shirakawa was Kama's tendency to randomly strip off her clothes. His main goal for entering the railgun world was to make use of his class's technical abilities to copy some skills. But for that to happen, the target had to actually use their powers. The fastest method would be to spar with Mikoto. However, he now had a better option. Shirakawa turned to Shirai Kuroko and asked in a relaxed tone, "Can you explain things in more detail?" Tokuwadai Middle School was a prestigious girls' school. Aside from a few rule-breaking students, Kuroko didn't have any male friends in real life. Looking at the gentle and handsome boy in front of her, her eyes flickered slightly. Since he was Onsama's friend, he was probably her own friend too. Besides, Mikoto had already said Shirakawa might be able to help with the level upper incident. Maybe he really could help. With that thought in mind, Kuroko nodded and glanced briefly around the street. They didn't even bring a computer, clearly not the right place for serious discussion. Let's go to the branch office. This whole thing is complicated. Shirakawa-senpai, you're an Asper, right? A lot of ability users have recently fallen into comas. It's because of level upper. While clinging to Mikoto's arm, she touched Shirakawa's skin lightly and activated her teleportation ability. In the next moment, their figures vanished. They reappeared at Judgment's branch office 177. Detected space-type skill, teleportation, is available for learning. Learn now. With his vision shifting into the Judgment office, Shirakawa didn't show much reaction. A prompt from his system panel indicated a skill was ready to be copied. Without drawing attention, he copied it silently. Space-type teleportation that allowed him to bring along people and objects. Incredibly useful. The situation was urgent. Kuroko didn't bother offering drinks, even though the water dispenser was nearby. She immediately played the level upper audio clip. It was a plain, unremarkable piece of music. But her expression turned very serious. "This is the audio. It's causing Espers to fall into comas. Doctors haven't figured out why yet. The original recording has already been sent to Professor Kama. We don't have any other solid leads. I was planning to go to the hospital to check on Saturn. The doctors might have more info by now." Kuroko quickly briefed them, partly to keep Mikoto in the loop. She then closed the laptop and turned toward the unfamiliar upperclassman. She'd found nothing under his name, meaning he wasn't a registered Esper in Academy City. As for what powers he had, she had no idea. But since Onsama said Shirakawa could help, she didn't press. She simply asked, "Are you coming with us?" "Sure." Shirakawa knew the entire storyline. He could even tell them outright that Harumi Kama was behind everything. However, he didn't. Besides hiding the truth about his abilities as a transmigrator and a system panel, his identity had to remain secret. To copy powers, spending more time around these characters was key. He was also intrigued by level upper. It was a network that linked Esper's brains together, creating a true multi-ability user. If the network's computing speed was high enough, could it potentially reach omniscience? Following Kuroko and Mikoto to the hospital, just as they were about to visit the unconscious girl in bed, they were stopped by a doctor who looked suspiciously like Guetta. He had made progress analyzing the patient's brainwaves. All the comatose espers had identical frequency patterns in one segment of their brainwaves. Once the doctor shared the details, they had a solid lead. Thanks to Konorima's analysis, they pieced the clues together and narrowed down the mastermind of the level-upper incident. It was Harumi Kama. I suspect these victims' brainwaves are being forcibly connected through audio into a massive brain network. Even if the individual computing power isn't high, the scale makes up for it. So, their abilities improve inside the network because all participants' brains are calculating together. Wearing a gray jacket over a white shirt, Konori pushed up her glasses. The green armband on her sleeve identified her as a judgment officer. Paired with a gray plaid skirt, she looked very youthful. She explained the situation to Shirai and Misaka in a calm and composed tone. Only at the end did her eyes shift to Shirakawa. As a friend of a level 5 Esper, she was inclined to trust him. What truly puzzled her was just how unfamiliar this boy looked. We'll need to go find Harumi Kama now. Kuroko had just finished saying this when the feeling of being close to the truth vanished. Her expression turned grim. They'd overlooked something. Another judgment officer, Aharu Kazare, was still at Professor Kama's lab gathering intel. The audio file had already been sent there. Which meant she could be in danger. Aharu might be taken hostage. Without caring about others' reactions, Shirai opened her laptop and began scanning the city's surveillance systems. Finally, she locked onto a fast-moving vehicle. I'll go and find Harumi Kama and rescue Aharu. But just as she was about to leave, Mikoto grabbed her wrist with a firm expression. Leave this to me. Mikoto didn't elaborate. Shirakawa still wore a calm expression, but his tone became more serious. I'll help too. After all, this was his chance to copy Railgun's ability.